Thank you. The time is now 5:35 p.m. on Wednesday, November 20th, 2024, and this public meeting of the D.C. State Board of Education will come to order. The roll will be called to determine the presence of a quorum. Director Butler, please call the roll.
Representative Barnes, Representative Lynn, Representative Mayer, Representative Ting, Representative Best, Representative Chang,
Present.
Representative Goulet,
Here.
Representative Henderson,
Present.
Representative O'Leary,
Here.
Representative Reed, Representative Williams,
Present.
Representative Patterson,
Here.
Representative Thompson.
Present.
Madam President, you have a quorum.
All right. A quorum has been determined, and the State Board will now proceed with the business portion of the meeting. Members, we have a draft agenda before us. Are there corrections or additions to the agenda? Representative Henderson.
I would like to make an addition and request that we put SR 24-26 onto the agenda.
Okay. And now I'm looking for someone to second it.
Second.
All right, so I have a motion made by Representative Henderson and seconded by Representative Williams. Members, before we take a roll call vote on this motion, I'm going to turn to Director Butler for the bylaws to confirm our process.
Section 405B5 of the State Board bylaws states that in order to add this state resolution to the agenda, 2/3 voting members must support a motion to waive the requirements of Section 405B1 through 405B4. The requirements of Section 405B1 through 405B4 are as follows. 1. The agenda item was considered at an immediately preceding State Board working session. 2. The title or description of the agenda item was sent to the Executive Director for inclusion on the agenda by noon, no less than 7 business days prior to the date of the public meeting. 3, an equity statement is attached. 4, A student advisory committee statement is attached. Or B, the student advisory committee did not hold a meeting since the previous public meeting. And 2/3 voting members support a motion to waive the requirements of Section 405B4A.
All right, thank you, Director Butler. Members, Director Butler will now call the roll to determine if 2/3 of voting members support the motion to add SR 24-26 to the agenda. Coming back to you, Director Butler.
Representative Ting,
Yes.
Representative Chang,
Yes.
Representative Goulet,
Yes.
Representative Henderson,
Yes.
Representative O'Leary,
Yes.
Representative Reed,
Yes.
Representative Williams,
Yes.
Representative Patterson, Representative Thompson.
Yes.
The State Board has passed by unanimous vote beyond the 2/3 to add SR 24-23 to tonight's agenda.
Point of clarification, when you get a chance. I just wanted to ask about that we discussed at the working session to rescind SR 2423. I thought that was going to be added to the agenda. So Representatives Patterson and I would have an opportunity to vote on it.
So we can, you can make a motion to amend the agenda, because that is not on the agenda. I thought that we were going to make the note in the meeting notes and capture you all's vote, so we didn't need to rescind it.
Did we do so? I thought the decision from the executive directors, we could not do that.
So I think there are two things. I think we have to finish closing out SR 24-23 on the adding of this item, and then go to have another motion to amend the agenda to add whatever item that Representative Goulet would like to add, but we have to close out the business of the first one.
Okay,
that
I
Representative
apologize.
Henderson. So the one we just voted on? So that one has been added. So are you making, it's less of a point of order, but it's another motion to add something else to the agenda? Is that what you're asking?
I am, but so I will be precluded from adding it because of the rule that it would have to be circulated in time. I thought the instruction was, and I would ask clarification from the executive director, I thought the agreement leaving the working session was we were going to see whether or not our votes would be recorded as yes when we were in a separate meeting. I thought the decision was that we could not do so. So I thought then the directive, if we could not do so, was that we were going to add the motion to rescind and then also redo that with a new number so that Representative Patterson and I would have an opportunity to vote. But I do not see it on the agenda, and I don't see the motion to rescind. So I would ask the executive director, were our votes recorded then in support of that resolution?
No, they were not. 'Cause
Okay.
you all were not in that meeting. So two things. After checking extensively, you can't rescind an action that's already technically been executed. So the majority of the board members that were there that voted in the affirmative passed the resolution. We are on. From being submitted, because it has already been submitted.
I'm very frustrated with this, and I'm fine with taking it back at this point because, you know, we logged into the link that was on the schedule. I take very seriously having a perfect voting record here in this body. We were told this would be handled, and it is not on the agenda. So I'd like to add a motion to rescind. I believe it's in order, typically with Roberts. If you're rescinding something, like there's already been a contract or something like that executed, you can't rescind that. But for something like this, I mean, you can simply say to the mayor's office, we're resubmitting under a new resolution. There's no harm to that. I really thought this was handled, and it's not handled. So I would like to add a resolution to rescind SR 2423 to the agenda at this time.
Can it be seconded down?
Oh, I can add a to the agenda.
Second.
Yes, that is a second.
It's a second. Okay.
Yes. And now, I'm going to come back to Director Butler to call the roll. On Representative Goulet's motion to add something to the agenda.
So I will now do a roll call vote to add something to the agenda that's not on the working session. So it will also need the same 2/3 majority vote that Representative Henderson's SR is added to the agenda. And I can go back and read the sections again.
Yeah. Point of clarification, this is just taking, so because we weren't able to vote on it during the working session, this would just be waiving the abilities to bring it from the working session to here?
So this would be to add this to the agenda. We would then
Yeah.
have time later in the agenda to discuss and vote on
Yeah,
it for
okay.
consideration.
Yeah, okay.
But right now, this vote is to add it
Yeah.
to the agenda.
Okay, sure.
But in order for us to have this discussion, we have to add it.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Sorry, just a note, just for clarification, because I think the audience looks a little concerned and probably
Perplexed.
just want to just give y'all some context. The context was there were 2 meeting invite links. Representative Patterson and Goulet ended up in one meeting invite link, and the rest of the voting members ended up in another invite link. And so some of this is just basically trying to get some consensus on what happened there. So I think y'all are looking like, what the heck happened? That's what happened. Thank you for that. Sorry.
All right, I'm coming to our Executive Director to call the vote to add this to the agenda for discussion.
Add SR 23.
It would be, no, this is, so I guess this would be now SR 24-20.
So the SR
Four.
that we voted on in discussion that had the enhancements and the appropriations for SBOE was SR 24-3. That is what we voted on, that's what the vote was recorded. So.
Point of clarification.
To add to the agenda, a discussion item around rescinding that vote.
Yes, let's just call it that. Let's not try to give it a number or anything yet.
It already has no.
Okay.
So what item to the agenda for discussion is the rescission of SR 24-23, the need for appropriations and enhancement requests for the DC State Board of Education.
Okay, I have another motion,
And it's been seconded.
Madam President? Okay,
We're just looking for the roll call vote.
Yes, that's it. Representative King,
Yes.
Representative Chang,
Yes.
Representative Goulet,
yes.
Representative Henderson,
Yes.
Representative O'Leary,
Yes.
Representative Reed,
Yes.
Representative Williams,
Yes.
Representative Patterson,
Yes.
Representative Thompson.
Yes.
SR 24-23, the rescission, of SR 24-23 has been added to the agenda for discussion.
Okay.
Madam President? May I move to add SR 24-27, approving fiscal year 2026 need for appropriations and enhancements? This would be an identical to resolution to the one that was previously circulated, it's just a new number. So that way we would rescind and then add, just giving Representative Patterson and myself a chance to be added to the vote of the prior resolution supporting the State Board's request for enhancements.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, I'm coming back to Director Butler for the roll call vote.
One second. It'll be SR 26. There's no 26 yet. Oh, one from Robert, got it. Representative Ting,
Yes.
Representative Chang,
Yes.
Representative Goulet,
Yes.
Representative Henderson,
Yes.
Representative O'Leary,
Yes.
Representative Reed,
Yes.
Representative Williams,
Yes.
Representative Patterson,
Yes.
Representative Thompson.
Yes.
The addition of SR 24-27 has been added to the agenda for discussion.
All right, members, I'm going to assume there are no other additions or corrections to the agenda, and I'm going to move us on to the minutes from our November working session and special meeting. Is there a motion to adopt these minutes?
So moved.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion on the minutes? All right, seeing no further discussion, the motion is to adopt these minutes. This is not a roll call vote. We are back to the regular yeas and nays. So please, all in favor? Aye.
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 Any opposed? Perfect, motion is approved. All right, on behalf of the DC State Board of Education members, I want to welcome guests and the members of the public, including those who are watching via the District Knowledge Network, to our public meeting. The State Board holds its regularly scheduled public meetings on the third Wednesday of every month at the Old Council Chambers at 441 4th Street Northwest. This evening, the State Board looks forward to hearing from 15 public witnesses. We encourage the public to sign up every month to share testimony. Sign up closes 48 hours before the public meeting, and the link can be found at www.sboe.dc.gov. Last month, State Board members and staff attended the annual conference of the National Association of State Boards of Education in Louisville, Kentucky. Thank you to NASB and our colleagues at state boards across the country for their continued partnership and knowledge sharing. We also met with Chairman Mendelson to debrief recent hearings on education topics, share updates, and discuss upcoming board work. I know that there is currently a hearing going on with regard to special education. Normally at this time, I would turn to the, interim superintendent, Dr. Mitchell, for her remarks. I am assured that Dr. Mitchell is on her way. So we are actually going to wait for her remarks until after tonight's panel. So instead, I am going to move us on to the expert panel. Our panelists will share about opportunities, challenges, and considerations associated with establishing a civil right to a high-quality public education for students in Washington, D.C. We are pleased to welcome you all. If you are here in person, please come to the table when I call your name. Marja Plater, Senior Counsel, Washington Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights and Urban Affairs. Kimberly Robinson, I believe she's on Zoom, Professor of Law and Public Affairs at the University of Virginia, and then Tanya Washington, Professor of Children's Constitutional Rights at Georgia State University. I understand the panelist from EdTrust is no longer able to join us, but I am hopeful that they will also be able to submit testimony, and again, encourage members of the public to submit testimony on this topic as well. Panelists, each of you have up to 5 minutes, and then we will move to one round of questions from the State Board. We will begin with Ms. Plater. Am I saying that correctly? Plater or Platter? Plater. Plater, thank you. We will begin with you. Please start when you're ready. Ooh. Somebody did. You should be good. It should be on. Can you hear me all right? Don't be scared. You can move it a little closer.
Is it on? There it is. There's feedback. Oh. All right, can you hear me okay?
Yes,
All
thank
right.
you.
Okay. All right, good evening. Thank you, President and members of the board, for allowing me to present testimony on behalf of the Washington Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights and Urban Affairs tonight. My name is Marja Plater, and I'm Senior Counsel at the Washington Lawyers Committee. For the last 50 years, the Washington Lawyers Committee has worked to eradicate discrimination and systemic racial injustice through policy advocacy and litigation, including in public education. The legacy of segregated and unequal education system is still the reality for many parents and students today. Black and brown students in DC are more likely to attend public schools that are under-resourced, outdated, and in disrepair. Since the promise of Brown versus Board of Education, school districts across the country, including those here in the district, have struggled to achieve true educational equality. It has been nearly 70 years since the Brown decision, and still, where a student lives, their race or ethnicity and their economic status determine the quality of education a student receives. While the district has made significant improvements to its public education system, its students still experience disparities in funding, graduation rates, literacy, school programming and extracurricular activities, and physical conditions of school buildings. At a fundamental level, codifying a right to an adequate education demonstrates the district's commitment to equal educational opportunities for all DC's public school students. It would expand the district policy goals of providing a high-quality education to DC students by making it a legal requirement and establishing standards to meet it. Increasing the quality of education will also increase the benefit of DC's young people of being engaged and empowered voters, jurors, and participants in the political process and competitive participants in the economy. This right would also establish a legally enforceable obligation allowing students to seek legal remedies to ensure equal opportunity to an adequate education. While there is no established federal constitutional right to education, there is federal recognition of the significant role education plays in American society. Every state, including the District of Columbia, has decided to provide public education to its students, and many of those states have state constitutions where they can enshrine that right into the Constitution or into their local law. Because DC is not a state, of course, DC does not have this opportunity. I do want to highlight, though, there have been a previous attempt to codify in DC a right to education. In the early 2000s, the Washington Lawyers Committee, along with several other civil rights organizations and a couple pro bono firms, decided to form a coalition to research and investigate this right and then advocate for it. They decided to develop an amendment to the DC Charter, and that amendment was the DC Education Rights Charter Amendment Act of 2006. It was presented to the council voted on it in 2006, and then later on in the summer of 2006, for some reason, it was actually tabled. I couldn't find any other further research of what happened to that Amendment Act, and it's not currently codified in law, so I'm assuming it didn't take any further action. I would also like to highlight that the complexity of the interplay between DC's local government structure, the two-sector public school system here, and the increased uncertainty of the federal government's potential interference with local affairs presents many concerns and must be considered before adopting a right to an adequate education for DC students. The primary purpose of creating a civil right to an education is to expand the opportunity for all district students to access high-quality education. And the State Board resolution should also reflect this. Just want to flag a couple of important considerations the committee would like to highlight, and that is determining the appropriate legal mechanism for establishing this right is important, whether it be through legislation or through an amendment to the DC Charter. Ensuring that the right applies equally to public and public charter schools is also important. Addressing how the right will be enforced, outlining a process for defining what a high-quality education is and how it should be measured. Also, it's important to consider how examining unintended consequences of creating this right. And if I may, I just will quickly wrap up. Including ways it may exacerbate existing disparities, undermine the by-right public school system, or create any unfunded mandates for already under-resourced schools. So I will quickly conclude that we support the State Board of Education putting forth the resolution, and we recommend establishing this right in DC. However, we urge the board to continue to research and rely on experts to ensure that this right guarantees all students across the city access to equal public education opportunities. Thank you.
You're next.
It has Kimberly next, but you want me to go?
Good evening, members of the State Board of Education. It is so wonderful to be with you today in the city of my birth and the city that holds my last name to express my support for the right to high-quality public schools measure, which I'll refer to as the measure. The remarks I have prepared for this occasion are drawn from my experience as a law professor and a fourth-generation educator, as a children's rights and education rights scholar, and as the parent of a third grader who's here with me tonight, and as a former K-12 public school system, student. This proposed first-of-its-kind initiative is devised to ensure that every school-age child in the District of Columbia has access to a high-quality public school education. By establishing a high-quality standard for all public schools, implementation of the measure will ensure uniform improvement in public schools across the district that will meet the needs of students and the expectations of their parents. If adopted as proposed, the measure would read, the district and its public schools shall provide all public school students with high-quality public schools defined as schools that equip students with the tools necessary to participate meaningfully in our economy, our society, and our democracy. Legal action to enforce this fundamental right shall be limited to equitable relief. This language has been carefully calibrated to ensure access to a high-quality public school, to empower responsible officials to enforce the district's duty to provide high-quality public schools, to provide an appropriate remedy for systemic breach of the entitlement, and to protect the District of Columbia from frivolous lawsuits. Despite federal constitutional protections for an equal education, which I will address briefly. The specific dimensions of District of Columbia Public School children's educational entitlement are a matter of local law, local control, and local enforcement. The proposed measure builds upon existing local regulations that grant each District of Columbia public school student the right to a meaningful education, the maintenance of high educational standards, and a system of public education that adequately and equitably seeks to meet the need of the individual student. The proposed measure fleshes out this framework of rights with apolitical language that, one, describes the substance and importance of access to a high-quality public school, two, establishes an enforceable and affirmative duty by the District of Columbia government to provide high-quality public schools, and three, provides a bounded enforcement framework for addressing systemic deficiencies that breach the government's obligation to District of Columbia public school students. The proposed measure, if codified, would empower local officials in their professional capacities and educational agencies to ensure every school-age child in the district can attend a high-quality school that is equipped to prepare them to meaningfully participate in our economy, society, and democracy. The proposed measure can insulate this fundamental right from the winds of political change, such that the quality of a child's education does not depend upon who holds elected office at the local or federal level. Adopting the proposed local measure would establish a high-quality education as a statutory right codified by the DC Code rather than as a political issue subject to electoral choices and personnel changes. 70 years ago this year, the U.S. Supreme Court issued a unanimous ruling in Brown versus Board of Education, and the opinion described the fundamental importance of education to a child's life and future. Neither that historic ruling nor the court's companion ruling in Bowling versus Sharp, which reached a similar decision with respect to DC public school children, has been overturned by the U.S. Supreme Court. They remain good law. And these watershed decisions, recognizing the importance of providing children with an equal education, provide constitutional grounding for the measure that is proposed here this evening. The immeasurable value of an education and the compounding harm to children deprived of access to high-quality public schools are no less significant than they were 70 years ago. Indeed, given the increasingly complex landscape that children must learn to navigate, the stakes associated with providing or failing to provide a high-quality education have increased exponentially. This measure, if adopted, would provide all school-aged children with a right to high-quality public schools, provide a mechanism for enforcement of that right, and protect the right against systemic infringement. Thank you.
And our final panelist?
Good evening. My name is Kimberly Jenkins Robinson. I'm a professor at the University of Virginia School of Law. Can you hear me? Can you nod if you can hear me? Okay. Today, I'm providing testimony solely in my capacity as an education law scholar and not on behalf of the Education Rights Institute that I founded and direct. Thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony about the proposed right to high-quality public schools measure. I'm honored to do so because I was born in Columbia Hospital in DC to a civil rights advocate and a registered nurse who emphasized the importance of getting a high-quality education. We lived in Maryland until my parents made the difficult decision to leave family and promising job opportunities behind to move to the suburbs of Richmond to secure a higher quality education for my brother and me. Our family faced the painful question that too many families face today. Where can we go to secure access to a high quality school for our child? Today, you have the opportunity to support a measure that answers that question with a resounding, you can send your child to the high-quality public schools of the District of Columbia. I will discuss 4 issues: how the unfinished work of Brown can be addressed through this measure, how a high-quality public school is defined in the measure, what does it mean that the right is fundamental, and enforcement. The central question in Brown was, do racially segregated schools deprive the children of the minority group of equal educational opportunities? The court answered affirmatively. It decided that our Constitution forbids denial of equal educational opportunity, in part because when a state offers the opportunity to receive an education, it, quote, is a right which must be made available to all on equal terms. Despite this clear language in Brown, the court less than 2 decades later determined that our federal Constitution does not protect a right to education in San Antonio Independent School District versus Rodriguez. Why? The court in part placed its hope in addressing disparities in school funding in the democratic process that you all are a part of today. Each of you are now offered the opportunity to deliver on Brown's unfinished promise of equal educational opportunity by supporting this measure. Defining a high-quality public school. The measure defines high-quality public schools, as Professor Washington mentioned, as schools that equip students with the tools necessary to participate meaningfully in our economy, our society, and our democracy. But what does this mean in practical terms? High-quality schools deliver the well-qualified teachers, up-to-date and essential resources, a robust course of study, and facilities that enable students to center learning. High-quality schools not only produce strong academic outcomes, they also prepare students to be both college and career-ready and 21st century global participants that can engage effectively in the neighborhoods and communities in which they live. A student who is ready for college and career can succeed in a job or the initial year of post-secondary education without remedial aid. Meaningful participation in our democracy requires students who are equipped with the analytical and critical thinking skills that are needed to critically assess information and knowledge, to engage with others in their community and with our political system. Understanding fundamental rights. So what does the fundamental language add to the right? Fundamental rights represent our highest and most important values. They provide the very fabric of our nation, democracy, and society. They receive the most demanding level of scrutiny, which means that this right to attend a high-quality public school can only be restricted if the government proves that it's pursuing a compelling interest and the means used are narrowly tailored to achieve this compelling interest. And finally, how can this fundamental right be enforced? Ultimately, the measure affords families a mechanism to have their voices heard when they seek systemic reform that delivers high-quality schools where they do not currently exist. A court may only provide equitable relief, which involves ordering a defendant to act or refrain from acting. For instance, if a group of students can prove they lack access to a high-quality public school, a court could issue an injunction that requires the State Board of Education to either correct the deficiency in their current schools or provide access to a different high-quality public schools. Damages are not a form of equitable relief and thus may not be awarded. The measure also is limited to high-quality public schools and thus does not provide a right for a student to attend a non-public school. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Butler will now call the round of member questions. Each member will have 3 minutes. This is a reminder to members and a notice to panelists that the 3 minutes do include both the time to ask the question and the panelist's response. I'm coming to you, Director Butler.
Representative Tang.
For just one question, so for the lady directly in front of me, you were a law professor, right?
Yes.
And then so what the enforceable process would be to, so the students could prove that they have suffered damage due to inequities or inequalities or some other infringement of this right, and then they would sue through the, like, would they sue the DC government or the US government?
Yes, they would sue. So this measure would impose a duty on the DC government to provide these high-quality public schools, which will be measured according to some of the considerations that Professor Robinson noted. And if the District of Columbia fails to provide a student with that right, then that student or students could sue, and their damages are limited to injunctive or declaratory relief. They wouldn't be able to sue for damages, for money,
Yeah.
right? They would be suing for access. So,
Okay, yeah.
you know, it could be that they are now zoned for a school that does meet the requirements of what constitutes a high-quality public school, but they wouldn't be suing for $1 million or whatever
Yeah.
that damage amount might be.
And would this, like, and could the federal government interfere with this, or would this just be a purely, like, DC government thing?
Well, the measure would impose the obligation on the DC government.
Okay.
It makes the DC government
Okay.
the responsible party for providing this, for this right.
I see. Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
No further questions.
Representative Chang?
On this last point, how does the suing work in a system where we have half charter schools and school choice, right? Where you already technically have access to go to any school in the district?
So I'm just hypothetically speaking, imagine a child is zoned, or the neighborhood school is a public school, not a public charter school, not a private school, but a DC public school. And that school does not meet the standards as set out in this measure. And that student and that student's parents want them to be able to attend that school and want that school to meet this standard. That's what they would be suing for, is to make sure that the DC government makes that school a high-quality public school. Not to say, well, we're not going to change this school and meet the standard, you can just go to another school, right? That would be a different kind of response that wouldn't have the effect of like uniformly improving DC public schools across the district.
And in a similar vein, I think would love your take on what happens immediately after, let's say this passes, right? What do you foresee as happening practically in the kind of first year and then the years that precede?
So I think that measures would have to be taken to assess what the schools throughout the district would need in order to satisfy this standard, right? What does it mean? And we would have to flesh out what it means to provide the kind of school that allows a student to meaningfully participate in the economy, in the society, and be career ready.
And to what extent do you think those standards would be different from the standards that are already in place?
Well, I think the difference between the standards that are in place is, one, they're not characterized as a fundamental right. That offers certain protections against infringement. So it also provides, this measure also provides a right of enforcement, right? And so it's not so much that the language is different, because this language builds on existing language, but it provides some teeth for enforcement of the right.
Based on your past response, it sounds like the teeth would only be for DC public schools, neighborhood schools though, right? Because that's what you would have an right to, and so the public charter schools would be immune from this.
I wouldn't use the word immune, right? Because I would hope that we would want public schools to provide high quality opportunities, educational opportunities as well. However, this measure is specifically focused on DC public schools.
Thank you. Representative Goulet?
I want to thank you both for your testimony tonight, and I want to really especially single out Representative Patterson for his leadership on this issue. I appreciate you raising the issue. I think it's a really important discussion tonight, and I think your testimony has been really helpful, both at what's occurred live and then by Zoom. So thank you all for coming out. I mean, I think you raised such good points about education being a fundamental civil right here. I support 100% what Representative Patterson's put forward. I would like to see it in the form of a resolution first, if we can do it. I think that's the next step. And then just kind of see where the landscape, plays out in terms of legislation. We're in a different place than we were a month ago. A month ago, I would have probably rushed right into this with you in terms of getting a bill out there. I think I'm a little bit more cautious at this point, just given the landscape that we face there. But I think the State Board making a strong statement that we support education as a fundamental civil right. I want to certainly work with my colleague on it, who's gotten a committee together to look at this issue, and would love to continue to get your feedback as we develop that resolution, if that's the path Representative Patterson decides to go. So I don't really have any questions because you did such a great job testifying, but I really want to thank you both. And is there anything else you'd like to say in the remaining few seconds of my time? All right, covered it all. Okay. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you both for coming out tonight.
Thank you.
Representative Henderson?
Thank you all for your testimony, and thank you, Ms. Plater, for the help that you've given to me to understand this and other issues in the past. My concern right away was about those unintended consequences, like guaranteed right to high-quality public education, yes. And as long as it's what you're describing, Ms. Washington, then I'm for that. So that the remedy is that we are universally improving our public schools in DC. My concern is, well, what's to stop a judge from saying, well, you can't get a high-quality education at this school, so the solution would be to give you a voucher to go to a private school. And so you spoke to this, and Ms. Robinson also spoke to this, that the equitable relief would not allow that. But I'm curious, like, what is the language that needs to be present in whatever is passed to ensure that that is the case?
And Mr. Henderson, I'm going to defer to my colleague, Professor Robinson, because she was instrumental in recommending that language, and I think she can speak to it.
Yes, so certainly the provision is clear that it merely applies to public schools. There is no right to receive funds of any kind to transfer to a private school. It is merely to guide the DC government in ensuring that the schools that are offered are of high quality. And so what you see in response to measures that focus on high quality education in other states is the legislature taking action to deliver that high quality education, whether it's funding reform, high quality teachers, class size measures, all of those things to sort of deliver on this promise. So really in the first instance, it's not actually about the courts. It's meant to be a provision that guides how government is delivering education. Courts are meant to be a last resort when government falls short, to make sure that there is an accountability measure in the hands of the people to be able to say, I have not received a high quality education, and therefore I would like to receive a high quality public education. Either the school be improved or they can attend a different public school, but it is not a right to receive a private school education.
And a judge would not have discretion, if we have, new judges. DC doesn't, we have federal judges, so is there any concern there, or you would say no?
So the judiciary does some interesting things. So to say, I would never go on record and say never, because I think the judiciary can do things that surprise you, but it would certainly exceed the term of the statute, and that's what I'm giving you assurance.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Representative O'Leary.
Y'all have piqued my interest. I've parsed some comments from all of your documents. One of them says two-sector public school system. And I imagine that's talking about the DCPS and the charter schools. And if we're talking about equal, in my experience on the board, equality is not equity, and equity is not equality. Something that bothered me, because it came up, high-quality standards for all public schools. Okay, that's a tremendous dream, but in order for that to happen, somebody has to get into the buildings and see what's wrong with the building and what's right with the buildings. And someone mentioned empower public officials. In my opinion, our public officials don't spend much time in our schools and don't see what's going on. Now, I went into schools a lot during my tenure, and I saw great things happening in every school I went into, all the time. But it's never acknowledged. It's test scores. And test scores tell you whether or not the school is working. And we're going into an era in education in this country that's never been seen before. Ms. Washington said that 2 cases remain good law. It's not totally hypothetical that Brown versus Board of Education could be overruled by the Supreme Court in my lifetime. Because they're already working on getting rid of good laws. I really appreciate y'all's testimony. I don't think there needs to be, I'm not arguing with you at all. And I think, but we need to make sure that the public understands that in the middle of January, we're going to have someone who's a wrestling promoter as the head of the Department of Education, and the dartboard that picks all of the cabinet members. It's going to be a whole different kind of thing, and we're going to really have to fight in this city, and to fight in this city, we have to have a one-sector public school system. Thank you all very much.
Representative Reed. Good evening, and thanks for being here. I kind of have 3 questions that have emerged. The first, I think, being with Dr. Washington's statement about the levers pulled. So I guess I have 3 questions. So what would the levers be pulled that would be used to make a school a, quote, high-quality public school? And then 2, what makes these levers different from what will be based on the Every Student Succeeds Act and the current accountability framework that we just established? And then 3, I guess given the context of DC, why not include charter schools in the language to have a common vision for DC schools?
So I'll take the first question. With respect to the levers, it's not so much the lever as it is the imposition of an obligation and an enforceable obligation. And it's an enforceable obligation that would need to be defined in terms of what practical aspects of a school make it a high-quality public school. I think Brown, which we probably should, given Mr. O'Leary's comment, we should pass this resolution before Brown is overturned. But I think like Brown offers some guidance there. It talks about facilities, it talks about curriculum, it talks about pay of teachers and other staff that help facilitate learning for students. So those things can flesh out what it means, but it doesn't, but what is important is that DC is obliged to provide that high quality public school, and that should it fail to do so in a systemic way, a systemic remedy is available that is enforceable through litigation.
So I guess in my, are you all familiar with the components of our accountability framework?
Yes.
And so why don't those meet the needs? I guess that would be probably a more blank question.
Well, they haven't.
Okay.
They haven't met the
We
needs.
just adopted them like a year ago.
Right, I mean, and I think there has been some progress made, but the language of this proposed measure is not only addressing kind of the quintessential aspects of a high-quality public school, but it's also creating enforceability measures, right? And that seems to be what will inspire a school district to improve the quality of its schools, is there being that enforceability mechanism that is built into the resolution or the ordinance, should it pass.
And I'll also just say a couple things here, although you're about to run out of time. But I'll just say quickly.
Ma'am?
Yes, so
ma'am?
accountability, sorry.
Yes, the person's out of time. We have to go to the next state board
we have to
member.
move on. Okay, that's fine.
So sorry. Representative Williams?
I will start. Thank you all for being here. Ms. Jenkins, do you want to take like 30 seconds or a minute to expand upon your thinking?
Sure. So what I was going to say is much of accountability, particularly under the Every Student Succeeds Act, very much focuses on things like graduation rates and test scores. Those are important, but preparing students, they don't always measure what we need to have students be college and career ready and to be able to meaningfully participate in our economy, our society, and our democracy. And so what we're seeing in education is an expansion of what does it mean to have a high quality education. It's not just about test scores and graduation rates, because sometimes students are graduating high school with an 8th grade reading level. They're not going to be able to review a ballot measure or vote responsibly because they don't fully understand the issues. So I think it's important to understand that we are seeking to move beyond the measures that are currently in place in this measure.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I think one thing to kind of flag for us as a board next time we revisit the school report card is what do we want to kind of see as the metrics that transcend test scores, transcend, attendance. While those are important things, that should be the floor, not necessarily the ceiling, for us to think about our leverage in improving the quality of public education in the city. I want to come back to you, Mr. Robertson. In getting practical with those things, if you would point to one or two things that you would include in that definition that could really help us have the enforceable teeth that this possible mechanism can achieve, what would you point to?
That's an excellent question. So I would say two things, although I really want to say three, but you're limited to two, so I'm going to pick two.
You have a minute, so feel free to take it.
Okay. The most important thing is high-quality teachers and school leadership. That is essential. For students to learn well and to be college and career ready, engaged civic participants, they have to have high-quality teachers. Second, you need the resource deliver a 21st century education. Technology, artificial intelligence, all those things are big now. Full science labs, all of those things, a robust curriculum of AP classes. These are really essential for having a high quality education. And the final thing I would say are the facilities that enable students to focus on learning. They should not be focused on the temperature, being too hot or too cold. They should not be focused on, rats running by their feet. They should not be dealing with any kind of vermin or other things like that. They should be able to say, this school is an inviting learning environment where I am here to learn and reach my full potential. Those are the three things.
Yeah, that's all very clear, and I appreciate the work that the three of you do and for being here with us today.
Representative Patterson?
Thank you. First and foremost, I want to thank you guys for coming here and really speaking to an issue that is near and dear to me. Not just that we're calling it civil rights, but the accountability aspect of this. I appreciate all of my colleagues and the questions that you guys have asked. And coming after you guys, I don't have a lot of questions because you guys ask great questions, first and foremost. And I also want to acknowledge that as we talk about across the board, because we are a two-sector educational ecosystem, that we do have a member of the PCSB, Ms. Carissa Stanley Beatty here, who just have an officer position, so I want to congratulate you on that. And I also want to make sure that I acknowledge Yesum's here, who is here from the DC Policy Center as well. Because it's important that we talk about what accountability looks like. I like that my colleagues have asked about the report card. And on the other side, we have Aspire that is coming for the charter schools. But we all know currently what we have is a system, even though we have Aspire and the report card, we have a system that is, the results is that 1 in 4 of our children in ELA are on grade level, proficient. 1 in 5 in math. That is our current thing. So even with these accountability frameworks in place, there's no teeth in them. We have a graduation rate that is in the 60s, 70s. I can't quote it personally. So something, as we say very, very, a lot now commonly, the math is not mathy. And we need something like this to hold people accountable. I will say in my last minute that I've never received the amount of pushback to hold people accountable for the education of students that I have on this particular issue. It was just fascinating to me. And from the people that it came from, who advocate on behalf of parents, but yet and still, they said, we don't want this right now. If the temperature is too hot, we're scared. Trump is coming. We need to put our head in the sand right now and do the status quo. I will end by saying our students cannot allow us to do the status quo for 4 years and hope that we get a friendlier person in 4 years to us that won't do something, take away home rule or put a control board in place. Every student in District of Columbia deserves to have a right to a quality education. I was recently re-elected. 230,000 people voted for me. They told me, Jock, go fight for us. I don't know what's going to come out of this body. I don't know what the rest of my members are going to do. But I'm going to fight for those children because they asked me to do so. I thank you and appreciate you coming here and helping me do that.
Representative Thompson? I actually do have questions. Transparently, I do have concerns. So some people know, most people know, DC's home for me, native DC through and through, and I have spent a good chunk of my career working nationally. What people might not know is part of my job has been to fight the folks who don't allow you to say DEI or to say CRT and all of those things. So I am super familiar with different playbooks that are couched as really friendly. And I do take those things very seriously because I always want to protect home and protect both kids who look like me and kids who don't. I do think, and I would invite a larger conversation about what you said, the unintended consequences. Because I do think the unintended consequences matter the most for folks who look like me and are from where I'm from. I have some, I don't think it's sufficient, and I would like to know more about, since we, unlike other states, we don't get to choose our judges, right? We're not a state. What would that mean? What interpretation does that open us up to? Or as we talk about like the difference between achievement versus what we provide. Because Vice President Patterson is right. Our high school graduation rates are not where they should be. We have students, like I have the ward with the highest adult illiteracy, but does a provision saying, are you guaranteeing us accountability? Are you guaranteeing us achievement? Are those the levers, or are you saying we are going to provide something different?
So the characterization of the right as fundamental would be protective before federal judges, or it would protect the right in a different way if litigation is brought and a federal judge is making this determination, because it elevates the significance of what the student is seeking, and it places, it gives greater, it requires greater scrutiny to any systemic action that breaches the district's obligation. And so that kind of confines the judge.
But
right?
what is the what? Like, is it Is it if I graduate from DC Public Schools and I can't read, I'm entitled to sue? Is it that if I go to, if my school is my neighborhood school and I don't like the conditions, no matter what, I'm on grade level or not, am I entitled to sue? Like I'm trying to get to, and I'm not saying you can answer it in 10 minutes, but I do think the what is the what is actually what's most important to all of us.
So you mean defining the, may I continue?
We'll count that as rhetorical, and I'm happy to continue this conversation offline, because I'm just saying that the what is the what matters. Because that's all our questions. So I am going to move us. I don't see Dr. Mitchell.
No. The hearing just finished, and she is en route from the Wilson Building.
Okay, so I'm going to get an update on Dr. Mitchell's arrival. I'm going to move us to our normal break. I'm going to give us 10 minutes in hopes that gives us some buffer time for her to get here. So we will reconvene at 6:45. And if she is not here, then we will move to public witnesses. Thank you.
An advisor, yeah.
She was my special.
I got to know
started
her
in
because
2003.
they were kind of cutting up
Right.
a little bit, and she was like, "Hey, girl, hey, get your neos together." Yeah, her loss was a big one. So that means you also know Kimber Minkiti?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, she's a good friend.
And I graduated. I started at Georgia State in 2003.
Yeah, I graduated, and then Pamela was kind of coming in soon after that. So yeah. So I love to see the way the university has grown. President Blake, I've gotten the chance to meet him. He's come up here multiple times. And he's like, every time I come up here, you give me all the business about what we need to be doing here in the District of Columbia. So they are starting to expand their footprint for Panthers here in the district, and I want to continue to be a part of that. Apparently now, hey, they're all on Martha's Vineyard. I was like, oh, Georgia State is on Martha's Vineyard. I was like, who the hell thought? Because I normally go at a different time of August. So he was like, no, you got to come during that time. So I'm going to try for this upcoming year.
I'm planning. This will be my first time at the Vineyard.
Oh, it's so great.
It's
so great. Now it is the height. You need like a dummy's guide too. It's really any time. High time is summer, but like all of summer. But like the highest time is really August. Yeah. Yes, you kind of have to. I'm not going. Well, I think I'm going to go for the Georgia State event this year, but I'm not going to go for our regular family vacation. It's so expensive to go there that we are taking 2 other trips for the cost of that one trip. But the utopia of blackness that it is when you get there is worth the money, which is why we've gone.
Where else?
Yeah. But give me a hug. It's good to see you off the camera. And make sure I get your information. Yes.
Okay.
I didn't get to tell you thank you because I was thanking her and thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
We did it.
I think so.
Okay. We know we're going to have a resolution come out of here, and then we'll see what comes next. And that,
As O'Leary said, we need to hurry.
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, we can't be fooling around.
All right, members. It is 6:46. As members are assembling, I'm going to give a brief agenda update. So I believe we probably have about 10 to 15 more minutes before the superintendent arrives. So I'm going to go ahead and move us into the first panel for remarks to keep us on time as possible. And so, yeah, so that's what we'll do. Then we will break, transition to the superintendent for remarks, and then we will go back to public witnesses. All right, so each meeting, we hear testimony from public witnesses, and your comments become part of our official record. If you would like to speak at a future public meeting, which includes a virtual option, please sign up on our website at sboe.dc.gov or contact our staff by email at sboe@dc.gov or by phone 202-741-0888. Tonight, we have 15 public witnesses who submitted public testimony. We will hear from those in attendance in a panel format. Each witness will have up to 3 minutes to provide comments. If you are with us in person, please note that you must use one of the microphones at the table, which are already on. After our public witnesses speak, we will pause for questions from board members. Members will have 3 minutes for questions, for our public witnesses, and those 3 minutes do include the question, comment, and their answer. Director Butler will call the public witnesses in groups and announce the question rounds. She will also assist us with timing to ensure our witnesses and board members stay within their allotted time. Director Butler, you may ask public witnesses to come to the table. I lied to everyone. Dr. Mitchell is here, so we are not calling people to the table. And I'm not going to read that again. I'm just going to have Director Mitchell come up. We will do that instead.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for making time for me. I just left a hearing, and so my apologies for being late this evening. So thank you, President Thompson, Vice President Patterson, and members of the State Board of Education. I am very pleased to be back with you this evening to provide updates on some of our shared priorities. It has been quite a busy month, and I won't be able to cover everything, but I'm happy to share updates from OSSE's recent hearings with the Council, from the recent Forum for Advancing Racial Equity in Pre-K through 12 Education in the District of Columbia, and from our November working session on reimagining the district's high school graduation requirements. Since mid-October, OSSE has participated in DC Council hearings on the important topics of career and technical education, teacher and principal retention, math, chronic absenteeism and truancy, and just today, special education. On October 24th, I was pleased to join Council to discuss career and technical education in Washington, D.C. Having led OSSE's Division of Post-Secondary and Career Education for the previous 10 years, this is a subject close to my heart. In the hearing, I shared with Council that the district is currently experiencing a CTE renaissance. Over the past 5 years, DC has gone from 2 CTE programs of study to 39, increasing CTE participation by more than 90% in the process. As a result, we now have more than 5,800 students participating in 133 CTE pathways across 32 DC high schools. Furthermore, as we have been increasing access to and participation in CTE, the district has also improved program quality, resulting in impressive student outcomes. 97% of CTE concentrators graduated high school, and 82% of those graduates gained employment or enrolled in higher education within 6 months of graduation. Yet, despite historic progress in CTE programming across the district, we know that we have further to go to increase access to high-quality CTE programming in high-demand fields like healthcare, information technology, and construction, and to increase student demand for these programs of study. These are goals that I will continue to strive for and that our shared work around graduation requirements will help facilitate. On October 29th, OSSE participated in a lengthy hearing on teacher and principal retention, a subject that I know is particularly important to many on this body. In this hearing, we shared that updated facts and figures regarding the state of educator retention in the district, including teacher retention in DC is stable and comparable to other urban school districts like Boston and Atlanta. Overall, teacher retention in the district increased from 83 to 88% last school year. DC maintained these figures despite expanding the teaching workforce by roughly 400 teachers. And principal retention increased by 10 percentage points over 5 years. OSSE looks forward to continued work with stakeholders across the district, including the State Board, to further strengthen educator retention and recruitment in coming years. On November 6th, we joined the Council to discuss mathematics education in the district. In this hearing, we highlighted that we have significant work to do to increase math performance and shared our enthusiasm for OSSE's Math Task Force to tackle this work. We appreciate Representative Best joining the task force as the State Board's appointed member. With 22 appointed task force members, as well as an advisory circle, it is a diverse and robust group with a lot of work in front of them, and it's vital work. I'm excited for the progress they have already made and even more excited for the work yet to come. On November 13th, I joined Council to discuss the essential issue of daily student attendance. During the hearing, I updated Council on key data and trends from the 2023-24 school year, including that chronic absenteeism declined by 3.9 percentage points, chronic truancy declined by 6.6 percentage points and has now returned to pre-pandemic levels. Ninth grade remains the biggest trouble spot for daily attendance. Pre-K attendance is highly predictive of kindergarten attendance, which has important implications for longer-term academic success. And student attendance declines on early dismissal days. I also shared information about what OSSE is doing to improve student attendance, including publishing the district's first state-level SEL standards, which State Board feedback made stronger and better, launching the district's first district-wide school climate survey, and creating a new state attendance coordinator position, among other continued supports. Student attendance remains a vital issue for the district and for OSSE, and I'm confident we'll have continued engagement with the State Board on this important topic as well. And for our fifth hearing in the last month, I just arrived from speaking to Council about special education. As I shared with the Council, providing strong oversight of LEA special education services to ensure compliance with the federal law and to hold LEAs accountable for academic progress is an essential component of OSSE's role. The district is making progress with 4 straight years of high ratings from the U.S. Department of Education, but there is more that we should be doing as a district to ensure that all of our students, especially our most vulnerable students, are receiving the education they need and deserve. Moving beyond OSSE's engagement with Council, I wanted to highlight our participation in the Mayor's Office of Racial Equity's Forum for Advancing Racial Equity in Education. This work is so foundational to what we do at OSSE because our core mission is to expand educational opportunity for all learners with a focus on those underserved. To support the district's racial equity dashboard, OSSE provides 3 metrics: 3rd grade assessment results for English, language arts, and math, 4th and 5th year adjusted cohort graduation rate, and 6-month post-secondary enrollment. African American and Latino students' assessment results, graduation rates, and employment rates continue to lag behind their white and Asian peers. For our education system and our city to truly thrive, students across all demographic groups must succeed in school and life. and we need to accelerate student growth to make this story true for everyone across the district. Finally, I'd like to thank the board for the wonderful discussion and feedback at your working session earlier this month on reimagining the district's graduation requirements. I really value hearing your thoughts on what our graduates need to thrive and what community engagement you envision around this topic. In fact, we are already implementing your recommendation to engage with LSATs, or LSATs, and I look forward to future engagement on this topic. Thank you very much for your attention, and I hope you have a wonderful evening.
Thank you, Dr. Mitchell. Always a pleasure for you to join us, and I definitely feel the pain as far as the hearings this month. And so I appreciate you being flexible with us. I hope you appreciate our flexibility. And I am now going to move us back to the public witnesses. So I will be turning to Director Butler to call public witnesses.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Before we get started, we will have a mix of in-person and virtual public witnesses this evening. If you are online, we ask that you put your full name by which you registered to testify in your frame so that we know who you are. Right now, we have individuals and we're not quite sure who is who online. So please, if you could change your name so that our staff can identify and let you in the room so that it matches the name by which you registered, that would be most helpful. Also, for all of our public witnesses, if you have not already submitted a copy of your testimony to the State Board staff, we ask that you send it to SBOE@dc.gov so that we can record your testimony in writing as a part of the official record for tonight's public meeting. Now we'll call the first round of public witnesses. Shazetta Thompson-Hill, Mary Bergstrom, Laura Fuchs, who is online, Kiana Lamons, who is online, Maya Martin, Kojigan, excuse me. Feel free to come to the table. Morgan Hall, Dawn Smith, who is supposed to be online, E. Christy Cunningham, who is also online, Zoe Fisher, I'm just waiting on confirmation to see who's online before we can get started. Sharzetta Thompson-Hill. Mary Bergstrom, you can start. As soon as you see the 3-minute timer, you can go ahead.
Okay. Thank you to the State Board of Education for allowing me the time to speak tonight. My name is Mary Bergstrom. I'm a lawyer and federal advocate in Washington, D.C., and the founder of Swim Up, a nonprofit that provides free swim lessons to youth in the district. Swim Up works with students from 2 independent tuition-free schools located in Ward 8, Bishop Walker School for Boys and Washington School for Girls. Both schools primarily serve low-income families of color. Our mission is to decrease disparities in aquatics, increase access to life-saving swim instruction, and stop the cost of swim lessons from costing children their lives. I am here to advocate for legislation requiring water safety and swim instruction in DC public schools. Drowning is the leading cause of unintentional death for children ages 1 through 4 and the second for ages 5 through 14. 79% of children in households with incomes less than $50,000 have few to no swimming skills. The median income in Ward 8 is just over $48,000. 64% of Black, 45% of Latinx, and 40% of white children have few to no swimming skills. When parents have no swimming skills, their children are highly unlikely to know how to swim. This impacts 78% of Black children and 72% of Latinx children. Black children ages 5 through 19 drown in pools at rates nearly 6 times higher than white children the same age. And Black people under 30 have a drowning rate nearly double that than white people of the same age. Disparities exist in access to swim lessons, as studies show the top reasons parents did not register their children is cost. Other top reasons, inability to find lessons and burden on parents. Teaching youth to swim does more than save lives, it opens doors. While it has been shown that swim lessons reduce drowning risk among youth aged 1 through 19 years old, Learn to Swim initiatives build confidence, help develop life skills, and open doors to well-paid, reliable first jobs like lifeguarding. DC's young adult unemployment rate was 9.1% in 2023, higher than the 8% national average. I am here in hopes you will support legislation requiring water safety and swim instruction as a part of the school curriculum in DC public schools. Last year, Maryland delegate Karen Tolles introduced a bill that would have required the state education department to develop a curriculum for water safety and swimming for public school students. While it did not make it out of committee in Maryland, feasibility of implementation would be higher in DC. DC has had more public pools per capita than any other city in the US in recent years, many of which are connected to or located directly on DCPS campuses. DC is now ranked 4th. The bill would have authorized schools to partner with local parks and rec facilities, and in DC, DCPS already has partnerships in place with DC Parks and Rec. A few school districts nationwide require students to learn how to swim, but there are still no statewide laws requiring schools to provide lessons as part of the curriculum. So due to the size of the district, the number of pools, and existing partnerships, DC is well positioned to be the first to successfully enact legislation requiring our public schools to offer swim lessons.
Thank
to
you,
youth.
ma'am.
Thank you.
Lord Fuchs.
Hello, thank you. In DC, we're back to examining the awarding of diplomas. Over the years, I've testified repeatedly on this question, as well as participated in previous task force on the credit hour and the like. 6 years ago, over 6 years ago, we set up that task force to deal with this very issue of looking at kind of graduation requirements and giving advice. And I'm here to say that I firmly oppose any ideas that would involve significantly changing our graduation requirements to solve systemic racism and other problems that exist. Instead, I believe that if history is to be repeated, which I have no reason to believe it won't, there are several likely proposals that will emerge from OSSE that will significantly make matters worse for our students. What I believe you will face is the decision on whether or not the credit hour should be more flexible beyond what has already been allowed through a waiver. This innovative idea that we've been dealing with for the past decade, brought up by DCPS and charter LEAs, will drastically allow DCPS to reduce the resources it puts into our schools and classrooms and will cause us to become even more of a push-out factory than the pressure already allows for. How do I know this? Just look at credit recovery programs. Over the years, DCPS has mismanaged credit recovery and allowed for greatly reduced workloads, education, and standards so that students get pushed through despite having previously failed courses. This allows students to earn credits without actually mastering the material despite demonstrating mastery, typically on computer-based programs. The teachers in these programs are pressured to churn students through and increase our graduation rates with little to no auditing of what is actually happening and what students are learning. There are credit recovery teachers who do go above and beyond, but that is often at personal risk of not being invited back to the program for ostensibly doing too much and not graduating through enough students. What is even worse is the notion that students can test out or just do a few assignments and master material. This ultimately undermines everything that a student does in our classrooms. As someone who's extremely opposed to standardized testing, I do not believe that a test demonstrates what someone has learned. It is one method, and yes, mastery-based learning sounds lovely in theory, but this is DC, the land of zero oversight, hyper-capitalism and private contracting, and competition between LEAs to graduate the most students. We cannot allow for them to find new ways to allow students to do 2 to 3 projects and a test, and then say they clearly have mastered world history. Worse, we cannot allow them to use a terribly written and racist computer-based system and then say the same after they've done a few hours worth of content. The credit hour is the only reason that our high schools offer more programming and opportunities than our middle schools. If we lose the credit hour and allow DCPS and charter LEAs to have flexibility, we will see a race to the bottom for who can invest the least in our students and graduate them the fastest. I have to go to the DCPS budget testimony, so I won't be available for questions, but I'll be back next month to talk about this. Thank you.
Kiana Lamons.
Hello. Good evening, members of the State Board of Education. I am Quiana Lamont. I'm a paid parent leader of Ward 7. All my children attend DC Public Schools. I'm grateful for the opportunity to speak today about critical importance of safe passage. Every child deserves the right to a safe journey to and from school. Unfortunately, many of our students face daily anxiety about their safety, where they encounter harassment or violence, where their bus arrive on time. These questions that should not weigh on the minds of our children. I personally worry about my child's safety every day. It's imperative that we provide a safe and reliable transportation system for all children, especially children with disability. I urge the State Board to continue supporting safe passage across the district. Additionally, I believe that RC bus system needs significant reform. My child who has disability rides RC school bus and has been incredibly inconsistent, disrupting their daily routine. The early pickup times along the wait times on the bus are unacceptable. To improve the bus system, I propose the following. Stabilized bus schedule, consistent pickup time and drop-off time will allow students to establish solid routines and better prepare for the school day. Number 2, prioritizing student safety, implementing strict safety measures. All school buses who transport disability children need to be careful on how they mix the children that have different disabilities to ensure that our children will be allowed safety. And if the child have to ride the bus longer than an hour in the morning, they should be allowed to have a light breakfast while on board so they can arrive to school ready to learn. Number 3, hiring additional driver. Increasing the number of drivers will help reduce inconsistent pickup time and improve all overall services. By addressing these issues, we can create a safer and more effective transportation system for our students. I look forward to partnering with all of you to ensure students have safe passage to and from school. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Maya Martin.
Good evening, members of the State Board of Education. Thank you for gathering us here tonight to offer public witness testimony about the work of the State Board, including its resolution on education as a civil right. My name is Maya Martin Cadogan, and I'm the founder and executive director of PAVE, which stands for Parents Amplifying Voices in Education. I'm also a native Washingtonian, a parent and of a seventh-generation Washingtonian, and a Ward 4 resident. There is no place that I love more than the District of Columbia, and her people are my heart. And our amazing parent leaders, Quiana, Dawn, Sharn, and Keisha, many of whom are testifying tonight, vulnerably share their stories and brilliantly advocate for the children in DC. I'm here this evening because a memo was shared that was written for the State Board by Andrew Brady, a partner in the California offices at DLA Piper, and my testimony today is in response to that text. And education is one of the most important things that we as adults and community together provide for our children. Education is an important civil right that ensures that every child receives the education that they need and that they deserve. I want to start by sharing that there is nothing in the spirit of this resolution that PAVE has a concern with. But we want to share what gives us concern and pause in terms of the process for codification, the interpretation, and the unique position DC holds given home rule. In DC, race and class are closely linked, and children don't have the same voice in our system because they cannot vote. Today in our city, that should be the state, the gulf between reading and math outcomes for Black children and their white peers is heartbreaking. We disproportionately lose Black children every year to violence, and many are in fear as they travel to and from school, and student engagement, attendance, and measures of social determinants of health are lowest amongst Black children. This is why our parent leaders at PAVE wrote a mission that described their work to ensure every child in every ward and community has access to a great, safe, and nurturing school. One of our main concerns at PAVE about the language in this resolution is that it wasn't informed by parents. If we are working on a civil right to education, it is incredibly important that we have parents at the table helping us to define the right that we want to enshrine. The language as it currently stands speaks to high quality, but what does high quality mean to the children and families in DC? How will that be understood when we send this to Congress? How will it be interpreted by the courts? We hear from so many parents that quality is so much broader than test scores. Today, you will hear from parents about out-of-school time programs, school-based mental health programs, safe passage to school, and schools where students are excited to attend every day. For parents, all those things are part of making a school high quality. When we asked questions about the impetus for this resolution, we were told that proficiency was the question. If we ourselves have not yet agreed on what high quality is and the intent of this resolution, we can only imagine how the courts might interpret it and how it could disrupt schools that are making progress and have a strong, positive school culture. Another issue that concerns us is that DC is not a state. When we looked at precedents nationally, advocates are promoting this type of language as a state-level constitutional change. We don't have a constitution since we're not a state. And in state, changes to the Constitution, just like at the federal level, have to be voted on by the people. But in this frame and DC's unique structure, this would go to the state board, from the state board to the council to Congress without DC's people having a vote. We also want to make sure that because DC is not a state, whatever we are sending to Congress is clear in its intent and its interpretation. We don't want this to go the way of HR 530, which is known as the crime bill. Thank you very much.
Morgan Hall.
Good evening. I'm here to testify to propose streamlining mandatory state testing. I'm testifying today as a citizen, but I'm also the assistant principal at Powell Bilingual Elementary, and I started in DCPS as the deputy chief of assessments, where I led the transition from paper-based to online park testing. I've previously led teams developing district-wide assessments for the Cleveland and New York City Department of Education. I believe deeply in the value of formative assessment data, but DC's testing regime exceeds federal requirements, and whatever they may be in the future, and it does not provide useful information for instruction. Additionally, it magnifies inequities that already expanded during the pandemic. CAPE testing is extremely disruptive and inequitable, especially for English language learners and students with disabilities. English language learners and students with IEPs are entitled to up to a full day for each CAPE test unit, which last year was 6 days in grades 3 through 5, 3 days of ELA, 3 days of math, plus 4 days of science testing in 5th grade. That's 10 days of testing in all. To put that in context, if a student misses 10 days of school, we are required to file an educational neglect report with Child and Family Services. And believe me, students do take the full day. Let me just unpack this a bit. The more days of testing there are, the greater the gap is between the education that our students with IEPs and our English language learners miss as compared to their gen ed peers. Yet, CAPE and especially the DC science test provide minimal benefit at the school level. We receive the CAPE results the next year. And we do not receive standard or skill-based data that could shift instruction. We receive paper reports of the science assessment for 5th graders who have already moved on to middle school, and I have never even seen a spreadsheet of sub-skills or topics. The science data is not used in your own OSCE report cards for school accountability. Our 8 to 10-year-old students are testing for days on end for assessments that are only used for teacher or school accountability. The precision of these tests does not match their use. There are higher stakes tests like the SATs, like AP exams, that are a half-day test, but 8-year-olds are taking 6 days, 10-year-olds, 10 days of tests. Schools right now are scrounging for time before or after school in the summer to provide tutoring to narrow pandemic learning gaps while teachers are exhausted. Yet the State Board of Education could give back up to 2 weeks of instruction for our 5th grade students and over a week of instruction for our 3rd or 4th graders with similar opportunities in middle and high school. I urge you to streamline the DC state testing assessments, especially considering multilingual students who take the WIDA and Access assessment, which is an additional 4 hours of federally required testing. Please also consider the formative assessments already in place, or at least make those assessments more useful for schools.
Thank you. Do we have Dawn Smith online?
Yes. Good evening, State Board of Education representatives. My name is Dawn Smith, and I'm a resident of 7. My oldest daughter, Maya, is a high school graduate from senior high school. My son, Nasir, is a high school student at Washington Academy. And my youngest daughter, Faith, who is 5 years old, attends Van Ness Elementary. I currently serve as a paid parent leader on the Ward 7 PLE board. Today, I am here to advocate increased access to specialized school programs and out-of-school time. Both programs allow students to explore develop their skill sets, and ultimately to become productive members of. I have seen the positive impact of both programs in the lives of my students, and would to see both programs grow to serve the needs for. Specialized school programs are important because they broaden our students' horizons by exploring them, or by exposing them to new opportunities. These specialized school programs can provide increased access to quality education and ultimately raise the performance outcomes of student community. My son attends Washington Leadership Academy, which specializes in IT and coding. The coding classes my son had to take each year have exposed him to new interests and are preparing him for success in the future in college and other career endeavors. I am thrilled to see specialized school programs available for our middle and high school students. I'd love to see opportunities increase for our younger students as well. I would like to see my youngest daughter, Faith, who is a budding artist, have access to specialized school programs at a young age that fits her interests and make a positive impact on her learning experience. As the opportunities are increased, I would like to see increased connections between specialized school programs and out-of-school time programs. How can we extend learning beyond the classroom? Out-of-school time programs tie building and quality education for students. They provide a chance for students to expand on what they have in the classroom and to explore new interests. As out-of-school time stands, I have noticed two major issues. The first is communication, and that there are so many different types of out-of-school time programs being offered that great fit for our students. However, by the time the information about these out-of-school time programs are shared to me or others, the programs are full. How can we rethink and increase communication about out-of-school time programs so the students and families are able to take advantage of what is available to them? Yeah.
Thank you. Chrissy Cunningham.
Yes, I'm here. Oh, sorry. Excuse me. Good evening, President Thompson, members of the board, staff, and esteemed panelists. My name is E. Christy Cunningham. I am the director of the Education Rights Center at Howard University School of Law and a parent of a former DCPS student who is now a mechanical engineering major at Howard University, and of two future DCPS students. I am testifying today to affirm some principles that should be maintained in the development and implementation of a civil right to education. First, positive and negative right. The civil right to education should be both a positive and negative right. In other words, it should further governmental responsibility to provide high quality, equitable education, and it should prevent interference or infringement with high quality, equitable education. Second, it should be regarding equitable outcomes. The positive right of the civil right to education should be based on clear, measurable, quality, and equitable outcomes in addition to equitable opportunity. Not only should students have equitable opportunities to high quality education, but also the right to education outcomes that cannot be differentiated by race, gender, neighborhood, socioeconomic status, family structure, or whether they attend neighborhood school, charter school, or private school. Outcomes should be measured not only by standardized tests, but also may include considerations of college placement, class size, second language acquisition, teacher paid training and retention, dropout rates, outcomes for students receiving special education, discipline and incarceration rates, supports for students' socioeconomic health, and access to music and the arts. It should be equitable. I see that I'm running out of time, so I am going to tell the considerations. It should be equitable. It should be comparative across sectors. So the standards for what is a high-quality education should be based on neighborhood schools, charter schools, and private schools. That's not that students should have an access vouchers to private schools, but the standard for what is high quality should consider what happens at private school. It should be community-centered because we know that children's outcomes are affected by as much as what happens outside of the classroom in the school building as what happens inside of the classroom. And it should include an expanded pre-K options that go beyond pre-K through grade 4. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we will start our round of member questions.
Since we have 10 people on this panel, let's do 4 minutes at least, because we normally don't have 10 people on the panel. 4 minutes. And did we miss somebody?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Zoe, but that's my disclaimer still applies. So 4 minutes for questions, because it's a big panel. And Zoe, we will hear from you first. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Zoe Fisher, a senior at School Without Walls and co-leader of the Green New Deal for DCPS initiative. You likely remember me from our testimony last year when you passed our Green New Deal for Schools resolution. Since then, we have worked tirelessly with the DC City Council, DOEE, DGS, DME, OSSE, and other agencies to let them know who we are and receive their help in creating a plan to implement the Green New Deal for Schools in DCPS. We have decided to prioritize one part of the Green New Deal for Schools at a time. Right now, our largest focus is to amend the District of Columbia School Emergency Response and Management Guide to include plans for schools in the face of the impending and evolving climate crisis. This guide was made to help local education agencies and school leaders develop site-specific school emergency response plans. It notes the importance of plan adaptation and preparation in the face of new threats and crises to preserve the well-being of district students, but neglects to talk about the impending effects of the climate crisis. As the climate crisis continues to increasingly affect DC, the safety of school communities must be considered. The Emergency Response Plan and Management Guide is the product of a collaboration between 9 governmental entities, referred to as an interagency team. The Department of General Services, DGS, which plays a pivotal role in maintaining school infrastructure, was not part of this interagency team that wrote the guide. How can schools be prepared for the climate disasters that are coming our way if the agency that takes care of their buildings is not involved in making emergency response plans? Furthermore, the guide was last revised in 2010. DC has experienced its 5 hottest summers on record since 2010, with the summer of 2024 being the hottest ever. Beyond rising temperatures, air quality in DC is an increasing issue. In June 2023, wildfire smoke from Canada reached DC. I remember smelling smoke just as much inside my school as outside. How can kids with asthma learn if everyone is enveloped in smoke in the classroom? Having grown up in California, where wildfires were nearly an annual occurrence, the wildfire smoke was more nostalgic than bothersome. I don't want other kids in DC to have the same experience I did. In New York, a state not known for dry vegetation and wildfires, currently has residents evacuating because flames are approaching their homes. DC is experiencing a drought, and there was a fire in Rock Creek Park only a few months ago. So these issues are coming our way, and we should take action before they become worse, and amending this guide will only make us more prepared. Thank you for your time, and you can expect to hear more about these issues and our resolution from my peers throughout this evening. And we look forward to working with you further.
Thank you. Now we will go to a round of member questions. The clock will be set for 4 minutes. Representative Ting?
Yes, my first question is for the lady who wanted to talk about safety on buses, and specifically, I want to go on the breakfast on bus idea. That idea confused me. Could you elaborate on the idea of having breakfast on buses?
Yes, so, for example, I'm gonna use my son, he's 10 years old. His bus come and pick him up at 6:41. He's on the bus from 6:41 until 9 a.m. And he doesn't have time to eat breakfast in the morning before he leave home because he have to get up so early just to prepare. And his disability, he has a mental disability, which is a tough time helping him get ready. So by the time he is ready, his bus is outside. So he didn't have a chance to eat at home, but I give him food to take with him, and they don't allow him to eat on the bus. So that means he go inside school at 9 o'clock in the morning, upset and angry, which disrupt the class.
I see, thank you. My second question is for Zoe. Specifically, you want to amend the guidebook to include more agencies as well as prepare for how many years of climate change?
Well, our proposal is that the guide will be amended every 15 years. And as it's clear that the climate crisis is evolving far more quickly than every 15 years, but I think that that is a good standard to set in place, at least at this point, and then going forward, maybe even more often.
Okay, thank you. And then for the leader of Swim Up, so my question is, would that be a requirement that every school with access to a pool, like near the facility, would have to include swimming lessons?
Ideally, we would start with high schools, as that tends to be the schools that have the most easy access to schools, so it would be grades 9 through 12. And then because of the additional schools available, it could be incorporated into the younger grades, but we would start with high school just because of the locality.
And like it would be only schools that have easy access to a pool for their students?
The legislation would ideally be for all DC public school high schools. And then, so Maryland, it would be drafted based on the Maryland legislation, so schools would be able to have partnerships with the closest DPR facility. Luckily in DC, there are already several high schools that have DPR facilities on campus, and then for those that don't, you would authorize partnerships with a DPR facility to hold the classes there.
Okay, thank you. My next question is for the person who wants to amend, like you in the gray, like the third farthest from, yes. So you would have this. So the streamlining would be ideally how many days of park testing for special ed and gen ed?
I mean, I can't speak to what the federal requirements will be or what meets the minimum requirement. I think some streamlining that could be helpful would be sampling for the science test instead of every student taking every unit. There are other assessments where it is a bigger consortium, so not all of the practice test items need to be tested by DC students. Last year, the third day in both ELA and math were just practice items. They weren't actually test items that mattered for the students. So 2 days of instruction were lost for every third, fourth, and fifth grader just to test items for the future year because it is a DC-only test right now. But other states are doing things like formative assessments, performance-based assessments. I think ideally DC needs to convene a panel for what is the next phase of state assessments whenever new federal regulations come out, or take this opportunity to do something better.
And what states currently? My time is up.
Thank you. Representative Chang.
Thank you all. Ms. Cadigan, one question for you. First, I'm curious, in the current frameworks that we exist in, when PAVE parents have issues and find that their schools are not living up to the expectations that they have for the schools, what options and outlets do they currently have at their disposal?
Yeah, I mean, I think one is, we work at a systems level at PAVE in terms of, and I think that's the spirit of the law. It's not about an individual parent, right? It's about how are all parents being served. And so I do think we have a number of different mechanisms through school improvement plans, through the way in which we engage parents around title funds. We have a lot of mechanisms already on the books for parents to be able to give that feedback. A number of our PAVE parents are actually on their LSATs. They're on the charter boards at charter schools, although charters are not included in this memo. They're excluded. So that also gives us pause and concern. But I mean, I don't think it's that there are not already avenues. I think the question is, how are we maximizing those avenues to make sure that parents know about how they can make sure that they get recourse.
Thank you. Ms. Fisher, I'm curious what the next step is in how you're thinking about moving this forward and what help you're looking for.
Yes. So we have drafted 2 resolutions, one specifically on amending this guide, and then the other on implementing more HVAC systems in school buildings. And both of them you should see in the next few weeks, as Representative Mayer and Representative Williams are both closely associated with School Without Walls. And then also, tonight you'll get to hear more details about what is in those resolutions and also why we are coming to you this evening with them. And then after the resolutions go through your working session and hopefully are passed, then we'll do what we did last time, which is move on to the City Council and work with them to pass them. And right now our main focus is, we're taking the Green New Deal for Schools one step at a time. So we're going to start with the parts of it that don't have any funding and try to get those through before this school year is over. And then hopefully we won't be only done with the with climate disaster plans, but then we'll be able to move on to other parts of it before June. So yeah.
Great, thank you. And Ms. Bergstrom, thank you for raising this to our attention. You cited a couple jurisdictions that have proceeded. Would you remind me what those are?
So there's no state law, but Florida has a law that, the name is escaping me now, but it does require the school board to provide resources on swim lessons, and actually they provide vouchers as well. Here in DC, all of those programs are free. However, the availability is severely limited due to staffing issues with DPR. In Maryland, the bill was drafted and didn't make it to committee, but it would have authorized the public schools in the entire state to develop the curriculum and implement it through partnerships with the Parks and Rec departments.
So in that vein, before we legislated, would you have recommendations for incremental steps we could take towards a blanket requirement?
Yes, so right now, I work very closely with the competitive swim manager of DPR, and so we are in communication about the needs and kind of where we're at a crossroads between the availability of swim programs with DPR and then implementing them in schools. So there are, like I mentioned, the DPR programs are free to DC residents and they exist. However, the staffing levels are critical, and so they tend to fill up quickly, are often canceled. What we have done is
Thank you.
Yep.
Representative Goulet.
I want to thank all 10 of you for coming out to speak with us tonight and for your really thoughtful testimony. I'll try to focus in on a couple issues. Starting with Ms. Lamont, I appreciate you raising the issue of the busing again. OSSI comes to our working sessions regularly. I'm glad to raise the issue with them and then continue to raise it at the DC Council, which has oversight of OSSI busing. I think it's critical that we make sure that we continue the improvements that we saw a year ago. It's always concerning when we hear that we're slipping back a bit. So I appreciate you raising it and keep letting us know if it doesn't improve, because we will follow up with OSSI on that. Going next to Ms. Fisher. So good to see you back again. I probably will bring numbers for later meetings, but this is it's good to see you. The disaster plans from 2010 didn't include DGS yet. We created the agency October 1 of 2011 is when DGS was born as an official DC government agency. So I think it's high time we add them to the plan. I think it's great that you're pursuing that, and I would be supportive in any way I can for that, because I think it's really important that we update that regularly as climate changes here in DC. So thank you for pursuing that. Don't give up on the lunch piece either. I know it's a tight budget, but I think what you have put forward on the issue of school meals is really important and would really make a difference for our youth. And there is a bill that's introduced on it already. So I'm going to keep pushing on that one too. I encourage you to do the same, but I love that you're trying to get this done here. So I want to support you in any way I can on that. And then lastly, I want to turn to Ms. Martin on the issue of your concerns about the resolution that we have. Now, this won't go to Congress. So an SBOE resolution, unlike the revised criminal code bill, which I spoke against probably every 10 minutes of sending that up to Congress, if we do a resolution here, it's not going to go to Congress. So we don't have the same worries about what would happen with potential interference, them striking that down. Would your concerns, if we did a resolution, still be there supporting the concept, since you said you support the spirit of trying to make sure that there's a quality public education as a civil right? Would those same concerns exist if we did a resolution supporting that, knowing that that doesn't go to Congress, and then working to try to promote the accountability, which you spoke of?
Yeah, I think a resolution is very different than what I read in the memo, which is about amending the code and sending that to the council, and the council sending that to Congress. I think that's exactly what came up in the, we can disagree on the merits of the crime bill, but I think we can all agree that we would rather make decisions ourselves as a state, or city that should be a state, about how we want to define what we want for our kids, right? And I can imagine, I think the thing that worries me is we send something to Congress, and for instance, imagine they struck the word public out of this statement. Yeah. That immediately changes everything, and I really appreciate all the conversation that's been in the room from a bunch of legal scholars, but I think people need to understand DC does not have the same construct of the other 50 states, because we do have to send anything that we create into legislation to Congress. And I also just want to highlight, our parents went to Congress in December 2023, just a year ago. We met with Virginia Fox's committee, and the number one thing they said they wanted to focus on was expanding access to high quality schools in the District of Columbia. But the way they defined that was very different from the way parent leaders at PAVE defined that. And so I think we just need to be very cognizant of the fact that this is not an amendment our people are deciding on and it stops there and then the courts interpret that. This is something that we would send to Congress, and then Congress could amend it as they saw fit before it was signed. And so I think that's a real question. So resolution's very different in terms of that's more focused on the spirit of what it is that we're trying to do.
My time is up. Thank you so much.
Representative Henderson.
Thank you to all the witnesses. And I want to start with Ms. Fisher. I want to let you know that the State Board at our last working session agreed to hold a panel in the January meeting on indoor air quality, and would invite your input and participation around that issue when we come to that. Next, I'll go to Ms. Bergstrom. I know that there are some partnerships currently where students are swimming during school time. I don't know if you might know how common that is, or if there's room to build on that to expand reach. Since it's during a school day, maybe there's different logistics in competing for pool time.
Yes, so I am one of those partnerships. That is why we specifically chose the schools we did, because they have a little more flexibility in their curriculum. But what our proposal moving forward to expand that type of opportunity to have it within the curriculum is to have schools partner with DPR that can also partner with other organizations like Swim Up. I am not the only organization that has a Learn to Swim program, and so the first step would be developing kind of a community network of organizations partnered with DPR that could operate during school hours. It removes all the burden off of the families. And as long as transportation and everything else is provided, because of the partnerships with DPR, you have lifeguards, you have staff in place, you have insurance in place, and then nonprofits are able to just come in and teach the kids.
And to confirm, your ask for legislation would include requiring all high school students to have swim lessons?
Yes.
So we are looking at graduation requirements, and I don't know, Dr. Mitchell is still in the room. I don't know if that's a possibility, but maybe that's an avenue at least worth asking about. Thank you. Ms. Hall, I have 2 kids, and they hate testing. And they come to me and they say it is a total waste of time. Would you say there are kinds of tests that are better than others? Like, I know my kids take CAPE, but they also take MAP. They seem to find more value in MAP, and I do too. Where do you see like the different types of tests that we might use or not use?
Yeah, absolutely. When I was working in the central office for DC Public Schools, it was some years ago now, but we had an assessment task force that asked that very question: what assessments should we be giving, at what grade, which interim assessments, formative assessments. Formative assessments are very useful for teachers. You can respond immediately to them. We use them on a daily basis at Powell. It's just important to consider that dual language schools might be taking them in English and Spanish. The 60% of our students who are English learners are also taking the access test, which tests their English language skills. So then why do they also need to take an ELA CAPE assessment? They're also taking a Spanish test, so their literacy assessment is tripled. When we don't get the results until the next year, the CAPE assessment is particularly worthless, whereas an online or an adaptive assessment that actually pinpoints this 5th grader is at a 1st grade level on this skill and a 3rd grade level at that skill is much more useful from an instructional perspective. And that's aside from a writing assessment where I can actually see the student's writing. We never receive the student's writing that they do on CAPE. It goes into a black box. We have no idea what to work on from it.
Yeah, thank you for that. I know we'll revisit accountability framework at some point, which is heavily tied to the CAPE test. I hope we can have a broader discussion about the assessments that are involved. Thank you.
Representative O'Leary.
Thank you all for this full plate of testimony. I try to pick a couple to talk about as an educator. Ms. Fuchs, has there been any kind of positive reinforcement about the credit recovery classes that take place after school?
She had to step away. I think she was going to testify at the DC Council.
She stepped away.
Oh, okay. Well, that's a rhetorical question. Ms. Hall, I agree with everything you said about testing. I would challenge everyone in this room right now to remember something they ever learned in a test. That's a rhetorical question, too. I think it's the wrong way for us to go as an education system to try to evaluate schools because of a test. I can remember, and I was teaching seniors, so I wasn't affected by the PARCC test, but I know that my people in the English department who were teaching 10th grade, they were teaching test-taking skills all year long, and not reading and writing, which is what they're supposed to be teaching in the English classes. I appreciate your testimony. Ms. Fisher, I just have one question for you. Why wasn't DGS part of the system that y'all set up? Did they ever say why they didn't join or why they weren't chosen?
They weren't created yet.
Okay. Because as you said, they're responsible for all the buildings. And I know that Roosevelt High School this year, on the day before school started, and if y'all remember what the day before school started, what it was like, I think it was 95 degrees or something like that. And their air conditioning wasn't working. But thank God they came and they fixed it so that the day that school started, the air conditioning was working in the building. But it was really just by the grace of God. And my last question is with Ms. Smith about out-of-school time. How much does that affect positively truancy to school when students are looking forward to out-of-school time?
So my son has had perfect attendance because he knows the only way he's going to be able to participate in out of school time is if he go to school. So that's a plus for me. And then he's in school and he's on the National Honor Society. And what I appreciated about his school is out of 35, majority of them were Black and brown young men. And you don't see that a lot in high schools or, public charter schools that they're inducted into the National Honor Society. So that played a big role throughout his whole matriculum at Washington leadership, especially with fellowship with his classmates and teachers and administration. They was always there for him, no matter what.
Thank you. My son is a first grade teacher in DCPS, and he works with before and after care. And I know that the students love before and after care. So that's
Yes,
something
so
that we need to do more of.
what I was surprised was it was more other staff besides teachers and admins that work at my daughter's school for out of school time, like custodians. And I was shocked because the kids take to them a lot more than anyone else.
Thank you. Representative Reed.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here. Mrs. Cadigan, thank you for your comments because I think the initiative sounds noble. The execution gives me pause, and how you framed it just kind of spoke to my gut, like my instinct about some of the things. So I appreciate hearing your comments about that because it also brought me back to the PAVE submission for when we were doing the accountability, and you all were like, let's move these things up to the top and let's put these in. What's the access to teachers? What's the access to out-of-school programming? All of those things. And it's like we have to look at these things together, and I guess a future opportunity would be as we're looking at graduates' profiles to consider some of this information too. So thank you for putting words to my gut feeling. What else? Ms. Lamons, I really appreciate your ideas. Ms. Smith, what specialized programs that you want to see in particular? Ms. Smith was online.
So I'm sorry. Yes. I honestly think it's up to the child because my daughter, she's in Future Stars and she wants to do karate. But the spaces, they booked up really fast at her school. So she has another chance to do it. So they have a lot of extracurricular activities as far as gymnastics, karate, volleyball, soccer, a lot of physical sports, and they also have other cooking. I wish I had the list. Once I get the list, I'll email it to you. But it's before school when she goes because I have to be to work at 8. Oh gosh, thank you, DC government. She has to write, and I appreciate that. And they did bring in math, a lady who's an author for math at her school, and I appreciate that as what teach us as parents what we could do more at home to help our children in education after school. So also with out of school time, we as parents need to know what to do when we have our children at home because we're their #1 teachers. So I should have stated that. I had my testimony, but it was too long.
It's okay, it happens. So I guess I want to use my last, minute and a half to talk about, there are going to be future initiatives related to high quality education, and I've been in a lot of conversations with the person who's going to be replacing me. So in my notes, and we're passing on to her related to high quality education, what are some of the takeaways or levers that should be pulled in relation to that topic? That can be for anybody.
Understand the child. Because high quality education isn't just academics, it can also be mentally. Because without a mentally prepared child or parent, that child will not go far, especially in DCPS or public charter schools.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'd like to jump in if there's time. I think there's a few seconds. And just say it would be wonderful if we could consider, this is Christy Cunningham, if we could consider expanding what pre-kindergarten means. There's evidence that if you look at 6 weeks to the age of 3, that it could have an equalizing effect on outcomes. And if you're worried about how to pay for that, the Justice Policy Institute says that it costs more than $100,000 for each incarcerated young person. So if we consider the savings of avoiding future incarceration.
Thank you.
Representative Williams.
Yes, thank you. Thank you all for your testimony. Ms. Fisher, just want to thank you for your continued advocacy along with your peers. We do have next steps with the resolutions that you drafted. I'm excited to talk about them at the Student Engagement and Experience Committee this upcoming week. And I do think it's a good suggestion by Representative Henderson to weigh in on the upcoming panel next month. Ms. Bergstrom, I'm totally in support of more swimming opportunities for DC students. Right now, it's a 3rd grade requirement in DCPS, right? Or a 3rd grade program primarily, do you know?
I don't know if it's a requirement, but there might be a.
Yeah,
I
misspoke. But like, is that the age that the program particularly works with schools at?
As far as DPR, that might be the case. We work with ages 3rd grade through 8th grade.
Okay.
But I'm not aware of, I know DPR offers programs for all ages, so.
Yeah, I'm just curious kind of like the scope of like where programming is reaching students. Did you want to comment on that, Miss?
I mean, I can speak to it. So at Powell, for example, our 3rd graders go to Roosevelt High School. It is part of the DCPS PE curriculum for 3rd graders. I think this is not my expertise, but having recently spoken with the director of it, I think something like 40 to 50% of DCPS schools are able to go. And we contribute as part of our school budgets to the busing. In our case, we can walk to Roosevelt, but other schools are bused to Marie Reed or other schools that have the pools.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I appreciate the context. And I think to your other point around useful testing and minimizing unnecessary testing, like I'm as a teacher in particular, like that just spoke to me, and I think that would be a great improvement for our school. One thing that I'd love to partner with Dr. Mitchell and Aussie around as well is like seeing if we can still meet federal guidelines, but provide teachers and families more useful data on student progress that really breaks down skills, helps identify where students are at. And I think that after talking with people at the NASB conference, there are additional tests that can do that rather than just a one-off report that doesn't actually inform instruction. And then, Ms. Cadigan, I'm curious kind of how you had kind of mentioned a variety of things with the education as a civil right. 2 follow-up things. One, do you support applying that resolution to both sectors of our landscape, both like the charters and DCBS? And then 2, I know you don't speak for all parents at PAVE and you have a lot of great advocates, but I'm kind of curious if there are any things that have kind of come up as to like how PAVE thinks about the key things in a high quality education, like things that we should prioritize.
Yeah, I think on the first question, I think if we're talking about the spirit of all students should have access to a high quality school, I think that should be applied equally across all public schools, right? So that's both public charter schools and DCPS schools. I think the question of how we amend the code is a different question, but if we're talking about should a child have access to a high quality school, I mean, that's literally our mission at PAVE, right? Is that every child in every ward and community has access to a great, safe, and nurturing school. On part 2, I would just point back to the mission, because that actually was written by the 8 parent leaders who are on our first board of directors, is that they talked about quality in the values, but they talked about great, safe, and nurturing. And I think now we have to ask the questions of what does that mean? I think Member Reed kind of referenced that from what we sent around the ESSA task force, that parents were looking for a number of different things. They were looking at data on teachers, like teacher retention. They were looking on re-enrollment data. They were looking on data on access to out-of-school time programs. They were looking at access to mental health professionals inside of a school. They were looking at a lot of different questions, like access to play space. So I think that it's pretty broad what I would say parents define that as.
Representative Patterson.
Thank you. First and foremost, I got a few questions for a few people, but I want to start with Ms. Fisher. It's always great to see you. It's always see your smile and for you to just come in and educate us some more and push us harder. So thank you for always coming back to us. Ms. Cunningham, she said something that was just kind of piqued my interest in the sense of talking about private schools. And as many people know that we already have vouchers in the District of Columbia, but we can't hold them accountable. And what she said is that, you know, being able to kind of using some type of mechanism to hold them accountable. And I truly believe it just kind of jogged my mind. It's like if any private school receives any type of public funds, we should have a mechanism to hold them accountable because they receive those public funds. So it just jogged in my mind, and I wanted to say that out loud. And then I want to go to, of course, my friend, Ms. Martin Cadogan, and I wanted to make sure, I'm glad that Eric kind of talked about where we are. There is no resolution at this particular time. And I wanted to make sure that people understood that we're still in that process of trying to craft what that language would be like, and that this meeting was intended to do exactly what has happened this evening, was to bring out good, bad, indifferent, look at perspectives and knowledge that some people may not have had, or history. One of the panelists talked about something I knew nothing about whatsoever, and I talked to her afterwards. And when I shared that memo, along with my colleagues and with you, Ms. Cadogan, it was because you have always been a thought partner to me. We know that we go back years to the inception of PAVE and everything like that, have always been friends, and I wanted to make sure that my thought partner had a view of what we were looking at so that we could start to talk about that, and I hope we can continue that. I think I still hold this, the record for attending most PAVE events and stuff like that by quite some bit, and parent engagement has always, as you know, is part of my professional life, and as a person, just something that I truly value. And so I'm hoping that in this interim time that we continue to have that conversation, and that PAVE parents who I love when they show up in the purple continue to bring that forward, and that we come to something that truly can hold accountability and have teeth in it, but also doesn't put, and I hear you, I want you to understand, I hear what you're saying about there are people that can do things to the District of Columbia that once it's out there, it's hard to take back. So I hear you 100% about that. And we're intelligent about how we do that and what we propose, that we don't do any harm as we try to do good. And I just wanted to state that because we've had such a long time of talking about things and advocating on behalf of our parents. You taught school in my ward for a number of years, and I know that and what that means to you and everything like that, and that means a lot to me. So I just wanted to say that on a record, is that we are in the process of actually, you know, trying to put a resolution together. So what does that resolution look like? And I welcome PAVE to be part of that, and the parents to be part of that, and have a lot of insight into that. So I just wanted to say that publicly.
Of course. You know, just in response to that, I think what I love about what Zoe put together is that this came from students. And what I would really encourage is, like, students should be a part of this, right? We shouldn't define a high quality schools even just from adults. Like, students should define what they think a high quality school is. And I really believe all students can do that. So not just high school students, but you can even get that from younger students. I think educators should define that. So I think if we're talking about even crafting the resolution, I just urge everybody to make sure you have every voice at the table. I think that's what people really appreciated about the first ESSA task force, is that everybody was together. We didn't all agree. We were coming from very different vantage points, but it's like, you know, that's the team of rivals that President Lincoln best described that gets us to the place that's good, right? And so I really hope that we bring every voice together and make sure that that crafts what our resolution looks like, and that, I think, creates the best thing for our city. This should be a state.
President Thompson?
All right. What's left? So I will make sure we follow up with Ms. Fuchs about specific recommendations, and it's probably worth us looking back at the work that was done around high school graduation requirements several years ago, as we get ready to revisit high school graduation requirements now, since there was so much engagement. Ms. Fisher, we'll look forward to the subsequent testimonies, and we'll make sure to share your testimony specifically with DGS, because we do talk with DGS regularly, and you have submitted testimony, so bonus points for that. Ms. Hall, I think it is worth us having a conversation around what does streamlining look like, because I don't want to say that CAPE has no use. I think CAPE's use is about state level proficiency. but it does not meet the use that you're describing, which is about improving instruction. And I think that's worthwhile. And so we should be having a conversation as a city around what is sufficient testing to make sure that we are getting good state level results so we know when children are or are not being served, especially so we can break out that data. And we want testing to make sure that it actually can inform instruction, because why else are we doing instruction if not to make sure our kids are learning? Ms. Smith, I don't know if she's still on the phone, but I really appreciate her points around programming, and I'm happy to follow up separately since she is a Board 7 parent.
I'm still here.
Thanks for hanging in there with us. Happy to have a longer conversation about that. I think your comments probably help bridge together some of what was shared about education as a civil right, and ironically, some of what was shared around the swimming. I was possibly, I'll call it forced because it wasn't my choice. I was forced to read Heather McGee's book. That's no shade to Heather McGee. It just was a point in time where everybody was reading it, and there was analogy that she used through that book, The Sum of Us, around pools. And the fact that when we mandated certain things in the South, instead of building more pools for Black people, they actually just drained the pools that they had. And so how we craft things really does matter, because the intent of legislation that said we want Black people to also have access to public amenities actually resulted in them just saying, nope, we'd rather nobody in the public have anything. And so that does very much matter. The reason a lot of Black people can't swim is because they drained pools across the country. That was actually something that is well documented, whether people find that history or not. And so I do think we should be very careful, not just about the spirit, but also the letter of things. And that is a worthwhile conversation for us to have. I would say I would push us a little bit to say that one of the things I have noticed as not just as a state board member, but I would say a resident of the district, is that we actually do not have a unifying vision for public education at all. I think that is a lot of the reasons we see people make school choice decisions. It's a lot of the reasons we see overcrowding in certain areas and other schools, quote unquote, being under-enrolled. It's a lot of the reasons people look for things like specialty programs because we do not have a shared sense of what is high quality. And so maybe that is really the thing that we need to tackle as a city. What is the thing? What is the what? That we are saying we are guaranteeing to all children, and that's a conversation I would encourage us to promote and have across the board as a State Board of Education. That is my time.
Well, I'd like to thank you all for serving as public witnesses this evening. We will now call our next round of public witnesses. Thank you. Yeslin. Excuse me. Yesleen Irahita, Dahlia Anderson, Keisha Clark, online, Sharn Boone Ruffin, online. Okay, in the room. Cole Hoffman, Jessica Giles, online.
Thank you.
We'll start with Yasleen.
Hello, members of the State Board. My name is Yeslin Iraeta. I'm a sophomore at School Without Walls and live in Ward 5. My experience with heat in schools has been dreadful. I've seen many problems with excessive heat in classrooms during my DCPS experience. Because classrooms are too hot, I can't get work done at school and lose sleep at home getting my work done late. The lack of effective HVAC systems in our schools has disappointed me. As a student, I value my education, and arriving at school in uncomfortable conditions that delay my education concerns me. Why isn't more being done? Could this be better? Why is something simple like temperature control not being taken care of? These challenges affect more than just me. For example, these challenges impact my mom, a school counselor in DCPS for 12 years. Recently, she has had to buy a heater for her office due to freezing conditions in her building. Having to change rooms constantly does not allow anyone to concentrate or to be comfortable doing so. It is sad to see that these issues do not only impact students, but also staff members who are dedicated to providing support. Considering the change happening to the planet, we cannot allow for environmental issues to detriment the potential for the future within our schools. Students should be able to arrive in a comfortable environment and feel welcomed, and staff members should be able to focus and be at ease in their workspace. Schools are not only buildings, but places where futures are built. I spend more hours in school than I do at home. School shapes the way I think, my growth, and my development, but it also shapes the way I feel and my ability to succeed. When I arrive at an uncomfortable workspace, unable to focus on the math test that I spent all night studying for, I don't feel that my well-being is a priority. How can I be expected to excel under these conditions? Fixing this isn't just about updating buildings, it's about taking care of the people inside them and showing the students and staff that they matter. I hope you take action and help create change to make every person at DCPS feel comfortable in school. I urge the council to support the climate change response resolution. Thank you for your time.
Go ahead.
Hello, members of the State Board. My name is Dahlia Anderson, and I go to School Without Walls. I am here today to illustrate the need for functioning and regulated HVAC systems in our schools and a regularly updated emergency response plan. As you heard earlier, extreme heat in underperforming HVAC systems can cause concentration issues among students. This can lead to underperforming in schools, which is a massive problem, especially as these heat waves will increase in frequency and intensity. According to the DOEE, extreme heat will become more frequent, which will impact students and staff in DC schools. A study conducted by the DOEE states that in the future, the district will experience up to 2 to 3 times as many dangerously hot days. The study also predicts that heat waves will become both longer and hotter. Additionally, just in the last 50 years, average annual temperatures in the district have increased by 2 degrees Fahrenheit and are expected to continue rising. Extreme heat events can cause a lack of focus and underperformance in students, as well as health concerns. According to the American Psychological Association, heat can cause irritability, impulsivity, and concentration issues. However, it can also cause more severe issues. For example, mental health and temperature are so intertwined that the American Psychological Association has found a 2.2% increase in mental health-related mortality for every rise of 1.8 degrees Fahrenheit. Also, there are physical impacts of high temperatures, such as heat exhaustion, which can then lead to heat stroke. The risk of heat stroke can be exacerbated by most psychotropic medications, which can be prescribed for ADHD, depression, and anxiety. This type of medication is taken by 1/6 of Americans. Heat stroke can be deadly and can cause persistent brain damage in those who survive. We need to be aware of the dangers of heat we will face in the coming years and make amendments to the District of Columbia School Emergency Response Plan and Management Guide as new data comes out about the climate crisis. Scientists and data specialists' knowledge about heat waves in the District of Columbia has always been changing, and it will continue to do so in the future, in the context of a changing climate. That's why we need the Department of General Services to be involved in the amendment process of the District of Columbia School Emergency Response Plan and Management Guide, and why we need it to be updated every 15 years. Thank you for your time.
I believe Keisha Clark is next, who is online.
Yes. Good evening, President and members of the State Board of Education. My name is Keisha Clark, and I'm a paid parent leader. I am here to discuss the critical intersection of chronic absenteeism and safe passage for students attending alternative schools. Imagine walking into a building every day where you don't feel safe, where bullying, fights, threats, or even the lack of support creates a constant undercurrent of fear.
Now imagine doing that as a student, expected to learn and thrive. For too many students, this scenario is their reality and is showing up in research as a significant contributor to chronic absenteeism. School and district leaders know the challenge all too well. When students don't feel safe, they don't show up. Panorama's recent State of Chronic Absenteeism report highlights a growing trend. Students with lower perceptions of school safety are significantly more likely to miss school, contributing to rising absenteeism rates. Admittedly, this is a complex issue, and its contributing factors prevent us from deploying one-size-fits-all solutions. COVID-19 exacerbated existing problems and compounded them with new challenges. Many of these are not directly tied to education, but occupy the forefront of students' minds. We can't expect students to show up at their best if they're anxious about their future. Further, we can't expect families to be hypervigilant about attendance if they're worried about the electricity bill. But we can listen and tailor a response that addresses individual needs and transcends just academic support. DCPS can turn the tide by addressing the physical and emotional aspects of school safety for older students attending alternative schools. Safety concerns include violence and harassment for fear of their commute during and leading up to school. There may be fights or even shootings, as we've seen on metro stations and boxes. Past negative experiences. Last year, we saw the shooting outside of Dunbar, or even the recent 10 to 15 person fight at Luke Seymour requiring a significant police response. And there are even higher rates of anxiety, depression, and chronic health conditions among students, all of which contribute to increased absences. Addressing these safety concerns requires a multifaceted approach. Those things might include dedicated staff to work with students and families to address individual barriers, collaborating with community organizations to provide safe walking rights and walking to school programs, exploring options for subsidized transportation, expanded bus routes, or partnerships with ride-sharing services, or maybe even implementing school-wide strategies to address the impact of trauma on student behavior and attendance. Ensuring safe passage and reducing chronic absenteeism among students in alternative schools is not just an educational imperative, it's a moral one. I thank you for your time and your attention to this matter.
Sean Boone-Ruffin. Good evening, member. Oh, sorry, is it on? Okay. Good evening, members of the State Board of Education. I'm Sean Boone-Ruffin. Okay. I am a paid citywide as well as PLE board member. I am also Dunbar High School Engineer Academy and Hope Tosin. I don't know what's going on. Can you hear me now? Okay, because it's making noises. Okay, can you hear me now? Okay. So today I'm here to testify about school safety and safe passage to and from school. Most specifically, I'm testifying about the importance of active shooters and lockdown drills. I found out that my daughter's school, which is Dunbar, has not had any active shooter drills this year. Last year they did practice an active shooter drill, however it turned out to be realistic, where a bullet came through the window of the classroom and injured a student. They had to then break protocol to escape the classroom, which is their safety net, and to go into the hallway, then again to the classroom, another classroom. This is unacceptable, especially in America and especially in DC. We are the nation's capital. We've never heard of an active shooter drill per se that turns into reality, where we have to break protocol. And again, why are we even stuck on this universal push the red button and hide? We have to become more creative when it comes to active shooters, whether it's inside the school building or immediately outside of the school building, as they see, because we had a student that was injured in the classroom, not in the school building, but in their classroom. This is unacceptable as a parent, this is unacceptable as an educator, and this is definitely traumatizing to my baby, who is an AP honor student, never been in that situation before, and she had such a traumatic event where she had to go see a counselor to talk about how, no, she's not afraid to go to school, but she's afraid to go to class, and for them to lock them in the building because you never know what can come, again, through the window. So again, we have to get off of the universal measurements of everybody having the same routine, active duty, or not active duty, active shooting, and go to a more robust program to where it's very fluid. It can happen on a football field, which they've seen before, where they had a shooting while they were outside doing a fire drill, and they had to escape from outside to go inside for a lockdown. This is unacceptable. We have to do better for our kids, DC public schools, DC private schools, DC charter schools, but most importantly, all students in DC. Thank you.
Cole.
Good evening, members of the State Board. My name is Cole Hoffman, and I am a senior at School Without Walls. I've been a DCPS student for 13 years, and in that time, I've seen countless incidents where school administration has not been adequately prepared to handle outside threats to students, especially involving unusual and confusing weather incidents. Although the wildfire smoke we all experienced last year may have felt like a freak weather event, agencies such as the EPA and NOAA predict an increase of over 30% in these events over the next 20 years. These incidents are no longer rare, isolated events. They are part of our new normal. Washington, D.C., like much of the country, is grappling with the compounding effects of climate change, including extreme weather, rising temperatures, and worsening air quality. Poor air quality poses immediate health risks, especially for students with asthma or other respiratory conditions, as well as staff members who may already be vulnerable. But the impacts go beyond health. When schools have to cancel outdoor activities, limit ventilation due to air quality concerns, or face closures, it disrupts learning and adds stress to families. Currently, DCPS is completely unprepared to address these evolving threats, working under a planning guide made almost 15 years ago. That framework was more focused on addressing the issues of violence in schools and included a little more guidance on severe weather than just shelter inside. Although those plans are still important and also need continual evolution, as Ms. Boone said, we need an updated plan that better allows schools to utilize their unique facilities and layouts in an emergency. In 2020, DCPS did a fantastic job installing high-quality MERV 13 air filtration in almost all of their buildings to help handle the COVID-19 pandemic, and these systems are quite capable of dealing with most air quality threats that a school may face. However, these school administrations have little to no training to use these facilities in an emergency, leading to misinformed decisions and unnecessary chaos. The next set of emergency response guidelines must take into account the current state of school facilities and safety equipment to better prepare our schools' leaders to protect their most vulnerable students. In summary, this resolution is about preparedness and prevention, not just reaction. Effective planning means identifying vulnerable populations, maintaining adequate indoor air quality systems, and establishing clear protocols for communication and action when emergencies occur. For DCPS, this means that guidelines for emergency response planning must be consistently updated with input from every relevant party, especially that department that maintains its buildings. Thank you for your time.
Jessica Giles.
Good evening, Executive Director Butler, State Board representatives, student representatives, and staff. My name is Jessica Giles. I'm a Ward 7 resident and Executive Director of the DC chapter of Education Reform Now Advocacy. ERNA is an organization advocating for a just and equitable public education system for all students. I am pleased to testify today, and thank you so much for providing a virtual option, a big win for the public. On the panel on education as a civil right, we know that under federal law, states and local education agencies are obligated to provide all children, regardless of immigration status, with equal access to public education at the elementary and secondary level. This, however, does not guarantee all residents the right to a quality education or even a high quality one. In fact, I'm a longtime DC resident, but I'm originally from South Carolina, and its constitution states that students should only receive a minimally adequate education, which is reprehensible. Ensuring students have a civil right to high quality public schools is an approach worth considering. However, there are some questions that need to be answered to ensure this approach is more than just an aspirational mandate. First, it would be important to know how the standard of education is defined. In other words, what are high quality schools? Second, are there going to be penalties that will be associated with DC public schools' failure to provide high quality education? If so, what are they? What direct or indirect impact would that have? Third, how would the standard and the penalties impact our court system, DC agencies, and funding for public education as a whole? Any resolution and forthcoming legislation would need to clearly address all three of these questions. Finally, despite the State Board's goal to prevent or limit lawsuits challenging the new standard, this type of guaranteed civil right will ultimately be challenged in court. Secondly, I urge the SBOE to vote no on SR 24-25, establishing the State Board Authority Working Group. In February of 2021, the State Board established an ad hoc board governance committee. For 2 years, the State Board conducted research and engagement on the issue of State Board authority, which included surveys, focus groups, and community feedback. I remember because I provided feedback, encouraged my community to share comments, and also testified on this issue. The State Board then created a report and voted on the changes to education governance in DC at the last public meeting in 2022. Further discussion on this topic is unnecessary. We've been here before and it's starting to feel like Groundhog Day. In closing, we've had major setbacks in academic proficiency because of the pandemic. Our city is facing less revenue than we have in the past, and we're going into next year under a new president and congressional members with zero respect for public education or for individuals that have been historically marginalized. I urge the State Board to focus its efforts on ensuring that all public schools provide students with a high-quality education by advancing evidence-based practices that improve student attendance, public school choice, literacy, math, secondary pathways to college and career. Thank you for allowing me to testify.
Okay, we will go to a round of member questions at 4 minutes. That was six. Representative Ting.
Yep, okay, so I'm just gonna wait for them to start. Okay. My first question is about the football field school shooting. What school was that?
It wasn't a football shooting. It was a shooting in a neighborhood, but they were outside on the football field for fire drill at the time. And that's Dunbar Senior High School.
Dunbar, okay. And secondly, for the School Without Walls people, so the specific action you're talking about is amending the guidebook, but would that include infrastructure for increasing HVAC? Like I know the city council, the budget has $255 million appropriated for upgrading systems like HVAC, et cetera. But would the policy you're proposing include that? And would it also include infrastructure to make school administrators aware of the new changes in the guidebook?
Our resolution would most likely include changes to the guidebook that may involve new training or new infrastructure for school HVAC systems, but doesn't necessarily do that. That's up to DGS and the new interagency team that will decide that framework.
I see. Okay. And as for on the point of the fluidity of active shooter drills, would that include like how would you want that to go through?
So the problem is, if you think back to the school shooting that happened in Georgia, it was done by a student that has gone through this active shooter drills. So he knew exactly the protocol on what is to happen and what was to happen. And that's how, sadly, it was carried out. However, if we change the dynamics by practicing in the cafeteria, by practicing in the hallway, practice doing PE, like instead of just being stuck in the classroom, students will know what to do and where to go at any and all times, no matter where they're at. Because again, a school shooting isn't on a calendar. It can happen anytime, anywhere. So we just want to make sure that the students are prepared, whether they're outside doing a fire drill, in the cafeteria, in PE, any and everywhere, not just stuck in a classroom, and that they're designated to go push a red button to lock the door, because it's not always going to be a red button to push.
Okay. And so, are there any states or other jurisdictions that DC could model?
Not at this time. I actually was on a panel Monday, and we were talking about it, which was on active shooting drills with NIH. So we were trying to come up with some type of system and even look even to other countries. But it's only the United States that are stuck with push the red button, and even some cities and some states are providing bulletproof book bags, which are unheard of to me. But, I mean, whatever keeps them safe, but at the same time, why should we have to go through that? You know, we need to protect these babies at any all costs. So that'll be basically a plan A, you know, to try to decipher how we practice earthquake drills, we practice bomb threats, we practice any and everything. Why can't we start changing how we do an active shooter drill? Because again, these students are with us 9 times out of 10 who create these examples or national news because of that. Just
Yeah.
make it more fluid.
Okay, yeah, I agree. Thank you very much.
Mm.
Representative Chang, who's online.
Thank you. Ms. Giles, would you share more about your concerns regarding the resolutions we're considering tonight?
Thank you, Representative Chang. So I have a concern with SR 24-25. It is to examine the State Board Authority. It's my understanding that there's been previous efforts to do this. And so I'm just pushing for the State Board to continue to focus on the urgent issues before students, attendance, literacy, math improvement, safety, which is a big concern that folks are raising tonight, and then strengthening pathways to college and career. There's just so many issues to focus on.
And then the questions that you're raising around the consequences of legislating education as a civil right, would you elaborate more on some of the questions that you have there?
Sure. It's my understanding that this would pertain to DC public schools specifically. And so one question I have is just ensuring that all of our schools are high quality, and that how would this, if it becomes legislation, how would that impact funding for public education? The lawsuits that may come out of, that may arise because of this language. We've had lots of debates in this city about quality. What is high quality? What does it mean? And so trying to get a definition that works for all folks, I see that as being something that will be richly debated.
Thank you. So just playing that out, what that, making sure I understand that right, it's, following from what we learned earlier today from the panel, if a parent wants to flag that their neighborhood school is not meeting our definition of quality, which as you're naming it needs to be clarified, that we do not have a clear path forward yet on how funding would be distributed to actually fix the problem. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm curious about that. I think that's one of the questions that this begs.
Great, thank you. Appreciate it, and no further questions at this time. Thank you.
Sure.
Representative Goulet.
I want to thank all the witnesses for coming out. I'll start with, was it Miss, let me make sure I've got your name right. Is it Ara Heta? Is that how you pronounce it? Did I butcher that?
It's in Spanish, so it's Iraeta.
Oh, all right, that's good. I won't try you, but thank you for correcting me. I think I do have some good news, hopefully on the heating issue, and that is that there is usually a turnaround time for the heating. And DGS starts turning the buildings over on October 15th, and it usually takes 30 to 45 days, because unlike like your home where you can switch it to hot, back and forth from air to heat, with the systems we have for large-scale buildings, a lot of them, they can't switch back and forth. It becomes an issue also during the summer where, sometimes it gets way too hot and they haven't turned the air on yet. So if they haven't done walls yet, hopefully relief is coming. Now, if it's another 30 days from now and it's still freezing, then we have an issue, because it means then the heat's not working versus it just hasn't been turned on. So have you actually felt heat yet, or is it maybe still in that transition phase? Do you know?
Well, right now in the buildings, in some rooms it's really hot, in other rooms you feel a sense of relief entering them.
Okay.
I just think outside for winter, that our heating systems aren't prepared for the amount of heat in November.
Yeah, that may be a different problem than if it's hot some places and cold others. So I think we should take a look overall at that and maybe look at modernizing those boilers. Ms. Boone-Ruffin, thank you for raising the issue of school safety. You know, I've been concerned for a while after the cuts that the DC Council made to our SRO program. I think a lot of the principals and parents came out and spoke in support of SROs because, I mean, they're police officers who love kids, who volunteer for the program, and really build positive relationships with the students. So I wanted to see, was there an SRO on site for that? And then if not, did your school ever have an SRO that was able to be there for kids in a situation like that?
Yes, so Dunbar definitely has SROs. It's just a matter of when that incident happened, it was outside.
Okay.
And so school was in session, meaning nobody is outside. But if we would have had at the time safe passage workers, then they would have still been outside. Because again, Dunbar has a rolling entrance, depending on the grade level, depending on their activities, whether it's community for the day in the community, which is an internship or a school field trip or a class field trip, or they're in the classrooms. So that particular day, they actually had a field trip that they were about to go on, which I'm not mistaken, before 10 o'clock, but after 9 o'clock. And at that time, they had power hour, where technically students weren't due to school until 10 a.m. So it happened in the midst of them arriving to school. So again, it was a rolling entrance. But again, safe passage workers, if they were present, then this would not have happened. Right now, we're fighting for safe passage to come back because we have not been having safe passage there for the last 2 weeks. And we see a difference. A student was robbed this morning for their coat.
What was the reason given why the safe passage workers were
There's
removed?
never a reason why safe passage disappears from high schools.
I was going to communicate with it about another issue we were experiencing. So at Dunbar, this is where the issue is?
Yes.
Right, I'll raise that as well, because I was going to send an email on this issue tonight. So I'll also mention the safe passage workers at Dunbar. And then lastly, in my last few seconds, I'll just make a commitment to, Ms. Clark's testimony. I'd love to follow back up with you on the issue of bullying. So thank you for raising it, and I'll follow up later because I'm out of time. Thank you.
Representative Henderson.
I have a question for Ms. Giles. You've asked us to focus on issues like absenteeism, student achievement, and safety. I'm curious as to why you think that trying to expand our authority, for example, to ask for data from government agencies, or to have great weight and be given the honor of a response from government agencies would be in opposition to that.
Well, my testimony is specifically about the State Board Authority Working Group. I believe that we know that there are certain evidence-based practices that improve education for students. We know that that is ensuring that educators have the science of reading training. We know that we need to do more on math. We're advocating for there to be investments in high-impact tutoring for math teachers, more supports for parents, and for high-quality instruction and professional development to support math. We also know that only 18% of students are taking some form of career technical education. So we need to deepen and expand those opportunities. So those are some of the, just a couple of the
I don't want to cut you off, but I'm just having trouble understanding why these are oppositional things. The working group, shouldn't be taking us away from those other things, just to reassure you. Should it pass?
Well, the last time you all looked into this issue, it was a 2-year effort.
Yeah, this is a continuation of that, is the way that I believe most of us see it. So I hope that would be reassuring to you. And I'm going to move to the students. I want to just say again, echo what I said to the previous panel, that we are going to be looking at indoor air quality in January. And I know that there's a lot of research that backs exactly what you're saying. I know you're drawing from it. I've been looking at it myself. And as powerful as that is, hearing you talk about how it affects your day-to-day in the classroom is really powerful. So I appreciate you sharing that here and hope that you will continue to do that. I see this issue as tied to student achievement, tied to mental health, tied to absenteeism. So it's really important, and I really appreciate you coming out to share that. And I'll stop there. Thanks.
Representative O'Leary.
Thank you all. Ms. Clark, you were talking about chronic absenteeism. We were at a NASB conference in October, and there were a couple of panels on what other states have done about absenteeism. And one thing that came up was the concept of neighborhood schools. When I first started teaching, all of our schools were neighborhood schools. And we didn't have chronic absenteeism in those schools because the parents knew all of the children in the neighborhood, and the students knew all the parents in the neighborhood, and the word got out. Can you think of any kind of solution to help the systems stem the flow of chronic absenteeism?
So I think there are probably a couple different things, but to address your point about neighborhood schools, I think, that would be the ideal situation, for us. But if you look at the data, I'm sure you already know most of the students in DC go to schools in other wards, and they're traveling upwards of 2 to 3 miles to a different school. And so we don't have that sense of community like we do. So, and that probably is in part because of what we're talking about tonight. There isn't high quality access to programming, to specialized school programs, to out of school time programs at every school or at the school in your neighborhood, which is why you're going from Ward 8 to Ward 1 or 2 or from 6 to 5 to try to achieve that. So until we have some sort of balance in that, I think we probably won't get to that neighborhood school model until we can get there. Absent that, I think some of the things that we can do in terms of the absenteeism is, really talking to parents about what some of the real barriers are. If the barrier is, my kid is being bullied on the way to school, or there's a fight, or I'm afraid on the metro, then we need to look at some different issues like designated bus stops, or we need to have some more people outside in addition to the crossing guards, the safe passage workers, the parents who will be out there. Just the other day, I saw I guess a group of parents have formed this bike tribe, if that's a thing, but they literally had 10 to 15 kids on a bike riding to Mari, and there were parents at the beginning, at the end, to make sure that they were able to travel safely in the bike lanes. That might be one thing we could do. Having a few more police at the metro stops and in the centers where we know that there's a high incidence of crime is an issue. McKinley Tech, we know students are being robbed. If we can have a greater presence there and have some greater partnerships. One of the things that Pave had said earlier was to try to bring all of the stakeholders together to kind of think through this problem. We know that they're meeting, maybe once a year, but hopefully we can pull them together in person to meet more often to really dissect some of these issues and to come together with a comprehensive plan to try to address them, because the most important thing is keeping our children safe.
Thank you very much, because we have this transitory kind of population in our schools where students don't go to school with their peers in the neighborhood. Thank you so much.
Representative Reed.
Thank you all for your testimonies. Ms. Boone-Ruffin, one of the, I guess, weirdest emails I ever recall writing in my term was about 10:51 on a random evening, because I live in front of Ketchum Elementary School and gunshots rang out. And I had to write an email saying, gunshots rang out, no one got hit, and I don't think this issue is over. And it was really weird to kind of write that, like, no one got hit, so like this is gonna still be an issue.
Right.
And I remember there was really no response because it's kind of like, how do you respond to being proactive but not a real true issue, right? Sure enough, about a week and a half later, time difference changed, 10 a.m. I can hear the students at Ketchum out on the playground. 10 gunshots rang out. And I say all that because I'm like, what are the elements of safe passage that we need besides the people in green vests to support some of those situations? So I'm going to keep going, but think about those elements. To follow up to recently over the summer, the commander in my district, MPD, myself, ANC commissioner, we all got on the phone. We were just really tired of the gun violence in our community, and essentially we were like, whatever you have to do to get the blocks together, you have to do it. Because I'm speaking about living in front of Ketchum, but I also live to the left of DC Prep, UPO Early Childhood, and now Blue Montessori School. This is all in the same block. We had to get MPD involved. And I will say, happy to report, my block is not block, a couple blocks around us are now very quiet, which means our school doesn't have to worry about those things. So all that to say, we often throw out safe passage with the intention to reduce some of those things, but I think we're leaving out some of the other components of like, what is safe passage? So with your time, can you define what does safe passage mean to you? Because I think you're also describing civil situations with what was going on in Dunbar, so.
Exactly, and again, coming from Ward 8, and I have to travel from Ward 8 to Ward 5 to take my child to what I thought was a safer community so she can get her engineering education. And for safe passage for me, I don't see that because I have to take my child to school, not public transportation, not her by herself. And I can't speak for other parents in DC who have that luxury. So to say that it's a 21-minute or 22-minute walk from Mount Vernon train station to Dunbar. There is no bus, there's no transportation, so they have to walk through different neighborhoods, which we all know have issues, and that's a safety issue within itself. However, when we did have all hands on deck because of that shooting last year, we did have safe passage workers that were communicating with students, built that relationship so they were able to walk back and forth to the train station, to the bus with them, and they felt safe. On that path, they also had MPD officers waiting out of their cars because we had an issue with them sitting in the cars. So now they're out of their cars, they're high-fiving the kids, they're giving them, pep talks and things of that nature because they're their first line of defense. They see them before they enter the school building. So they're able to change their personality, change their attitude from a bad day or rough day because they're late for school or something like that to now they have a positive outlook, now they can complete their day. So it's all hands on deck. It takes a village. I was raised in the 90s, so we were all looking out for everybody, and everybody needs to do the same thing with our babies today.
Cool, and students want to say about safe passage or components? We might run out of time, I'm sorry. But I would love the student perspective on what components of safe passage are too, sorry.
Representative Williams.
Yes, Ms. Iraheta, Ms. Anderson, and Mr. Harvard, thank you for your continued testimony. I think you had all kind of spoke to the well-being issues of how this is kind of just a core piece of being able to do well in school, stay focused, feel like the school system cares for you. And it's interesting that even in our earlier panel, in talking about education as a civil right, facilities came up as like a core function and a basic requirement. So I'm glad that we have student voices like yours to continue to move this work forward and consider me an ally in figuring out what those next steps look like. Ms. Giles, I appreciate you kind of raising all the points you made and also the concerns around tonight's working group resolution and vote. I think that it's good in hearing the questions with Representative Henderson to kind of tease out, that this is a continuation of the work that the Governance Committee has already done, and it's in service of all the initiatives, in my view, that like you named, that will allow us to do that better by improving our ability to get data to be able to act on issues of safety, issues of attendance, issues of student achievement. There's so many things that by improving our ability to do that, we can do a better job for students and families. And then Ms. Boone-Ruffin, it's incredibly alarming for me to hear your testimony. I mean, especially given the incident you named, to not have that top of mind in being able to have a plan to be able to implement it. I know when Representative Goulet had asked you about kind of what response you had gotten, there wasn't a reason. Do you still feel like there's not action steps as to, now, I understand it with that question, right, that the particular drill that we have may need to be upgraded and that, but even not doing anything to where people don't know how to respond in those situations is really concerning. Has the administration acknowledged, anything in the future that could help make people know what to do in those circumstances?
So, again, it's very fluid when it comes to any type of lockdown because they're not trying to traumatize the children. Because, again, some of us live in the communities where this is an everyday occurrence, and the students are actually desensitized to what's going on. And it's sad, when they did have a lockdown drill last year, she was like, they were playing. Like, they got broomsticks, they got chairs, and was like, oh, we're going to fight or flight. And then it actually happened, and then they went into that shock mode to where, okay, they went into action, they knew what to do, they knew how to push the button, they knew to close the curtains, they knew to stay away from the windows, and it's like, what prepared you for this? Oh, because we already went through this time and time again, elementary school and in middle school. So in high school, we already know, now we're ready for the next steps to prepare on how to stay alive, not just to hide. And that had me thinking like, okay, this is true. They kept with the universal code for all of these years. Now they're in 10th grade or 11th grade or 12th grade, and they're like, okay, I'm tired of hiding. I have to fight to get to school safely so I can fight to stay in school. What do we need to do? And I'm with them on that. Like, how can we change the dynamics and make them more safer, more involved? When we want to input them into their education, this could be a part of that as well, their safety.
Yeah, I think student voice is critical, and I know a couple of the social studies teachers there who do like Project Soapbox and other programs through MICFA Challenge that look at elevating student voice, and I'm wondering if this could be something that students could lead on, and with regards to that. Thank you.
No problem.
Representative Patterson.
Thank you so much. I kind of feel it's necessary to kind of give a little bit more context to SR 2425 because some of the people that are here and we're discussing it weren't here when our president was chairing the governance board toward the end of the last term, and some of you guys were just coming on, and the amount of balance that you had to use in trying to make sure that we presented something but didn't, try to create a very hostile and adversarial kind of, report that we put forth. I remember, as we were getting ready to vote, a lot of the conversations that came and the discussions about it, what would go in, what wouldn't go in. And I truly appreciate how you navigated that first and foremost. And I wanted to say that because I also appreciate now because we did that and then we just let it go. We didn't talk about it anymore. We kind of just said, okay, we did a report. We put some recommendations forward. Let's put this on the shelf or whatever the case may be. That's why I appreciate SR 2425 because what it's asking is for 3 things out of that, one of which I felt very strongly about because I've been in ANC, as you have, Madam President, and it asks for something as simple as great weight. For those who know ANCs, they have great weight whenever something comes before them and they can put forward something, and the agency is supposed to give them that, right? We don't even have that. We don't have that. So we can put forth something, and if an agency doesn't want to consider it, guess what? They don't have to. They have to give it nothing, right? So when I look at this, it's more about how can we be most effective in our jobs. We already know in 2007, we were stripped of most of the statutory authority that most Board of Educations have. So when we have people, and I'm just coming off of a re-election campaign, and people think I can do certain things that I can't do, all this allows us to do is our job a little bit better. 3 things: to do our job a little bit better and to follow through on what they're asking us to do. I appreciate this coming back, that we didn't just let it slide and go off into the sunset and never think about it again. I'm really looking forward to being able to be more effective and more efficient for those who cast ballots for us and who's going to need us to step into a lot of gaps that are coming our way. So I just wanted to say that here, and I appreciate those who have brought it up. And I look forward to when we get ready to vote. Thank you.
President Thompson.
All right, I want to thank this entire panel for their time and attention this evening. I appreciate you all as students following up. I will reiterate, I guess, Representative Henderson's invitation to come testify about the panel. At the panel on air quality is actually not in December, it is in January. So you're welcome to come testify before then, but it is in January. Both Ms. Clark and Ms. Boone-Ruffin, I appreciate you all giving us thoughtful, tangible recommendations to work with. I think it's really important that I flag the Office of the Student Advocate is actually having ongoing safety conversations right now. I believe that we have you all's testimonies, and I will make sure to share them with the Office of the Student Advocate. Ms. Boone-Ruffin, I know exactly what you're talking about because my sister lives maybe 2 blocks away from Dunbar. And so I'm aware of all of those incidents. And I got a call today about a similar incident that happened at HD Woodson yesterday. And Safe Passage actually was on site. And so we do have to talk about, like, what is the expectation across the board, who's responsible, who does what happens in the in-between times, because there's a lot of things that happen in the in-between times. So I really appreciate you giving voice to that. I don't have any questions because I think folks have done a good, really good job of asking all the relevant questions. And I believe in only asking questions that I need an answer to. And so I am happy to say that we can close out public testimony for this evening. I want to thank you all for your time, and I want to move us on to our final business for the evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Based on our amended agenda, I think we have not one item, but a couple different items for vote. I do want to say we reached a compromise, which we can discuss when we get to the last 2 vote items on the agenda. We can use the discussion time for that to see if that is amenable to all of the members. I don't want to say we're going to remove them in order of the compromise. I want them to discuss it. So for each of the items, I'm going to look for a motion and a second. And I'm going to follow by Director Butler reading the resolution into the record unless someone waives the reading. Once the resolution is read into the record, we will have member discussion before roll call votes are conducted. We will first move to the vote on the state resolution SR 24-25, establishing a state board authority working group. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Okay, so sounds like Representative Williams. Do you want to be the second?
I can be the second.
All right. So it has been moved by Representative Williams and seconded by Vice President Patterson. Director Butler, I'm coming to you. Yes.
Can I make a motion that we not read the resolution?
You can. Is there
I
a
second that.
All right. Is there a second? All in favor of waiving the resolution reading, please say aye. Aye. Is anyone opposed? All right, we all want to go home. Motion carries. Is there discussion on the resolution? All right, hearing none. I am going to say the motion is to adopt SR 24-25. Director Butler will call the roll.
Representative Ting,
Yes.
Representative Chang,
Yes.
Representative Goulet,
Yes.
Representative Henderson,
Yes.
Representative O'Leary,
Yes.
Representative Reed,
Aye.
Representative Williams,
Aye.
Representative Patterson,
Aye.
Representative Thompson.
Aye.
SR 24-25, State Board of Education Resolution establishing the State Board Authority Working Group has passed unanimously.
Thank you, Director Butler. Thank you, members. We will now move on to vote on State Resolution SR 24-26, calling for a standalone education committee in the Council of the District of Columbia. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Representative Henderson. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Representative O'Leary. Director Butler, are we reading this into the record, or?
Motion to waive reading it.
Oh, you can move that. Is there a second? Thank you, Representative Singh.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. All in favor of waiving the reading, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. All right. Is there discussion on this resolution? Representative Henderson, Patterson, Goulet, in that order.
I'll try to be very brief. First, thank you to the board for voting to put it on the agenda tonight despite not going through the normal process. That's not the way that I would prefer to do it, especially to bypass the Student Advisory Committee. We did that for timing reasons. I was able to reach out to each of the student representatives and solicit their feedback. I thank them for their thoughtful reading and feedback. I also want to thank colleagues who gave input from the first ask about this. Dr. Patterson in particular, like I hear you on, like, this is not a panacea, this is not a guarantee that things will start moving in any particular way, but it is something that constituents bring up frequently. It came up in the hearing today, and my hope is to be able to bring this request in the interest of having a dedicated education committee, a place where that can be the sole focus of a council committee. So I will be voting for it. I hope others will as well. Thank you.
Thank you. As you stated, Representative Henderson, is that I've been here for quite some years, and I've watched this committee move from different chairmen, and then under Gray, it moved into the committee of the whole, and then it moved back out, then it moved back in, with, we can say various degrees of effectiveness and impact and how that happened. And as I stated when I was corresponding with you, is like a lot of it depended on kind of like the temperament of the person who was actually chairing, which is always interesting to me. That being said, I told you I was indifferent to this based on that alone. I don't think I've decided how I'm going to vote at this particular time, but I just wanted to say that out loud to my colleagues and give them my rationale of where I am thinking. I think I won't know until we actually call the roll, but I wanted to say that out loud. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and thanks to Representative Henderson for moving this. I want to also kind of put my thought process on the record for this, because I do have mixed feelings about it. On one hand, I think we have really developed great staff right now in the Committee on Education. I think we have experienced staff who, from everything I've heard, do a fantastic job working on the committee. So if there's a turnover in the committee, it would concern me that we would be potentially losing those experienced staff. I also do think Chairman Mendelson has done overall a very good job on this. I like during the last 2 fiscal cycles that money went back into our schools, our local schools, and I think that that is something that is very important. And I think the job that he did to make that happen in the budget, he really deserves a lot of credit for, because it was he who got it done working with his staff. Though I do have pause at this point, and I'm going to put it on the record because I want to be consistent. I've committed to support an education committee, a standalone education committee, when I ran for 2 different offices, and I don't want to be consistent with that. I think the only thing that gives me a lot of pause right now is the fact that we have Republicans now taking over, a lot of uncertainty, a president talking about eliminating, federal education programs, potentially a whole department, and putting those back in states. So I don't want to see transition right now. However, what bothers me is the fact that we have not given the public the type of opportunity to testify during the performance and budget oversight that we should. And it's something that I raised 2 years ago, and it wasn't fixed this year. And it is deliberately disrespectful, in my opinion, on the part of Chairman Mendelson to the public. And it would be different if we were asking for additional time for public testimony, but we're actually just asking that 3 agencies, DCPS, OSSE, and the Deputy Mayor for Education, get the same amount of attention as much smaller, less important agencies get. Because right now, witnesses only get, public witnesses, 3 minutes to speak on that entire education cluster. What that causes then is a witness list to balloon to 300 to 400 witnesses. You have 1 out of every 5 people dropping off because they're disenfranchised because the list is too long, and then not having time to speak in any detail about the myriad of very important and different issues that affect those agencies. There is no reason to be doing that, and it leads me to 1 of 2 conclusions. Either conclusion 1 is the chairman doesn't have time during budget season to actually hear from the public about their concerns, and that really is the only time, from the time the mayor submits the budget until there's a council vote, to be able to hear from the public on what changes need to be made to the budget, and he doesn't give them the time to do that. So it's either he doesn't have time or he doesn't want to hear from them. So in either instance, my vote is then towards creating an education committee where the chairperson will dedicate the time to hear from our LSATs, from advocates, and for parents. And if the chairman decided to take a different tack on this, it would change my mind, but I really feel that everyone benefits from hearing from the public. I always benefited from it greatly when I was a committee director and a staffer to the council and a budget director to the council. We took the public testimony very seriously, and oftentimes it influenced decisions one way or another. So the fact that the chairman is deliberately restricting public testimony is why I'm voting the way I am. Plus, I like to be consistent with what I promised on this, so I will be voting yes today on this resolution for those reasons.
Further discussion? Okay. I don't know if I'm indifferent. I'm not indifferent. I just don't, I'm of 2 minds on this. I have said many times that I think it's important to have a committee, actually similar to you, Representative Goulet, because somebody has to do the homework, and the staff matters. I am really appreciative that there is now a staff that is built out around education. I also agree with you, Representative Goulet, that in many ways the chairman has been a champion for making our schools whole to the best of his ability. And I also just generally, in my experience as someone who has worked very closely with the previous committee chairman, including the actual chairman of the council, I think it's better when it is a at-large member. I also, like you, Representative Goulet, do not love what I have seen around the witness testimony And I'm happy to also just continue to follow up with the chairman around that. I think it's kind of good practice to have not everything in the committee of the whole, all the things. But I do think it matters who gets this committee, and I understand wholly that that is the prerogative of the chairman. And so I don't have a crystal ball to be able to read which thing is better. But I feel like some of my concerns have been addressed around the staffing. But I also think Representative Goulet's continued point about the ability of the public to engage is something that has not been fully addressed. And so I think it's worth stating that because there are good things that we want to keep, no matter who chairs the committee. And I think that's important to just the quality of public education. And so I think I'm glad we're discussing it now. I do wish that we would have had the opportunity to discuss it further at the working session. And I'm not saying that it's Representative Henderson's fault, because it was not representative. That is not. I just want to be clear, because Representative Henderson hung in there with us to the end. But I understand that what we put on the record has consequences, and I think we are trying to do our best, not having a crystal ball. And so those would be my thoughts on this in particular. And I look forward to conversation with the chairman in our next meeting to talk about the results of this resolution. If there's no further discussion, I'm going to go to Director Butler for the vote.
Representative Ting?
Yes.
Representative Chang? Representative Goulet?
Yes.
Representative Henderson?
Yes.
Representative O'Leary?
Aye.
Representative Reed? Aye. Representative Williams?
Aye.
Representative Patterson?
Aye.
Representative Thompson?
Aye.
Resolution SR 24-26, calling for a standalone education committee in the Council of the District of Columbia has passed.
All right. Now, I'm going to look to Director Butler to help me along with the next two resolutions. And so I think the first one was, what was the first one?
To rescind the special meeting.
All right. So the first
Resolution.
one is to rescind. I do not believe there is a written resolution, so I don't think we need to waive the reading.
Yeah, there is no
I do want to give the opportunity to discuss a potential compromise. And so I am looking for the best way to do that. Is it best to move the resolution and talk about it in discussion?
Yes.
All right. So if someone wants to move the resolution. Oh. I like this more elegant approach. Yes, I'll take that.
We can't hear you online.
So I
Representative
think,
I apologize. I had turned my mic on and off with a double click. So I'll quickly repeat that just for anyone watching online. So what I would do is move a motion to reconsider Roman numeral 3, which is the approval and agenda of minutes. And I assume those are the minutes from they would include the last working session that we just, the special meeting pre-working session last time, right? Correct?
to reconsider the special call minutes, yes.
Yeah.
I will accept that as a motion if someone would like to second it.
Second.
All right. Let us discuss. So I conferred with Director Butler during the break because the issue here is one of recordation. Currently, we passed meeting minutes at the beginning of this meeting that recorded as follows. essentially the folks who were on one Zoom call were counted, and the folks who were not on the Zoom call, on a different Zoom call, but were present and Darren witnessed, our staff witnessed they were present. And so I am asking that we reconsider the minutes to keep it as a unanimous resolution, and just record the votes of all who attempted to attend the meeting. That would allow us to not have to rescind our budget items from the mayor's office and then pass something new with a new number, because the issue here is folks would like their vote recorded. And so that is the compromise, which is why we are reconsidering the special call meeting notes, because that is the only item on that agenda. Further discussion. I don't know if that was helpfully. Yes.
Very much so. President Thompson, I thank you for coming up with, I think, what's a very good compromise on this. All Representative Patterson and I wanted to do was be recorded in support, and we actually did vote yes on it when they called out the vote. It's just then we realized no one could hear us because it was on a different call, but we could still hear the meeting. So, we were voting in real time. It's like we were just kind of in an ante room with staff then hearing our vote. So we were there for both roll call and the vote. So I appreciate you coming up with this compromise. If it's acceptable to you, can I move an amendment at this time to amend the minutes from that special meeting to just note that Representative Patterson and I voted yes. So I move that amendment orally at this time.
Well, I think first we have to close this motion out.
Yes, thank you.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if there's any further discussion or if anyone has any questions. All right. Okay. So sounds like we then need to vote on this, which is the reconsideration. And so all in favor of voting on the reconsideration of the special call minutes. Do we need a roll call vote, Director Butler? All right. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Perfect. Motion carries. I'm coming back to you, Representative Goulet.
Yes. I move a motion at this time to amend the minutes to reflect that Representative Patterson and myself voted in the affirmative on SR 24-24, was it? I want to make sure I'm 23. SR 24-23. That we reflected that we voted yes on that resolution.
Okay, so moved. Motion, second?
Second.
All right, it has been properly moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? All right, none. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Perfect. Motion carries. Now, we have the other two items. And so what are we doing with those? Are we tabling them?
Without objection, could I move a motion in block to table both of those measures?
Mm-hmm. All right. It's been properly moved by Representative Goulet and seconded by Representative Ting. So we will table those and let them roll off the table. And so, all right, perfect. Love when we can get to a compromise, because that's what we do as members of a board. So I want to thank all the members for their time and engagement tonight. The State Board will next convene at our working session on December 4th. As a reminder to members of the viewing public, next month's working session is being held a week early on December 11th. That is a Wednesday, because the holiday season is rapidly approaching, and we need to close out our business so that the staff can also have a holiday season. So with no further business before the State Board, I will now entertain folks' favorite motion, a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you. A motion has been made by Vice President Patterson. Is there a second?
Second.
I think I heard a second from Representative Williams. I'm sorry, Henderson? Henderson, somebody. Somebody said it. All right, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. All right, the ayes have it. This meeting of the DC State Board of Education is adjourned at 9:15 p.m. Thank you, everybody.